I mean, does it matter that much?
YouTube doesn't like swearing.
Oh, right. True. Okay.
All right, give it a second. YouTube's online. Twitch. Mm, mm, mm. Why is Twitch always it's the worst? It's just all right.
Just like you.
All right. Hello, and welcome to episode one of Drinking Beers and Grinding Gears. My name is Jeremy. I guess behind my podcast. I guess there's another guy here too, but I did all the hard work. He's just here. So we got a very special guest for our first episode. He's a two-time award-winning novel seller named Jordan Peterson. He's over there. What's up, bud?
How's it going, man? You didn't tell me about that. That's highly disappointing. I feel like I'm gonna bail now.
You're gonna fail. Well, you got a lot to live up to.
Gonna bail.
Oh, gonna bail. I know. Well, that's gonna be one of our episodes later, is discussing why the fuck you hate Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, that'll be a long one.
Yeah, yeah. That's one of the ones where we can try out watching some videos together and talking about them.
Yeah, fair
But
enough.
but yeah, so this is episode one. Tim and I are been friends for what, like 7 years now?
Yeah,
Something
give or
like
take.
something like that. Met in university. One of our favorite things to do in university was to get drunk and argue. So we figured might as well live stream it to the world while we do it.
Even if we didn't want to do it, it tended to happen regardless.
I blame you.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, go through some different topic ideas. Today we're gonna try socialism versus capitalism. I think we all know which one's better, but I guess we might as well discuss it. Yeah, I'm gonna finish this beer and start another one. We're gonna keep a live counter. Tim's going a little soft today, but we'll get him there eventually.
Feel like I'm already ahead of you. But I guess I'll use this opportunity to introduce myself too, even though I didn't really do any work for this apparently. Uh, my name is Tim, as he said, and uh, my education is in philosophy and library science. I'm working on my second MA, and based on me not liking Jordan Peterson, I'm sure you can assume that I'm a little bit more left leaning than Jeremy is, but I wouldn't call myself a liberal at all. And yeah,
What do you do for work right now, Tim?
right now I work in a kitchen. I used to be a head chef, but while I'm in school, I've stopped focusing too much on the kitchen work. But yeah, that's my other passion, I suppose.
You got a plethora of different talents.
Yeah, I mean, when I cook chicken, I cook it all the way through, which is something you seem to not know about. So,
Yeah, it's alright. At least I can fucking season a burger, and my coleslaw tastes good too.
yeah, fair enough, fair enough. We'll see. We'll have to do an episode on cooking.
Well, I'll have to. I can't. You know what I can't wait for is when all this pandemic stuff's over. I can't wait to try doing a live episode where we're actually hanging out together.
Yeah, it'll be a lot better if we don't end up fighting.
If we don't end up fighting. Well, there'll obviously be a little bit of fighting. I'll buy like some sock and boppers or something like that, bud. Keep
I
it
guess you'll have
simple.
to have somebody moving the camera around, though.
Well, I'm sure we'll have a few people there. Like, Jess can come down and do the camera work,
Yeah,
or we'll just set it up like a good old amateur porno far away, and we can see the whole room.
yeah, fair enough. Get ourselves a couch.
What, you don't own one already, bud?
Yeah, it's pretty dirty at this point, though.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I slept on it one too many times.
Exactly.
Yeah, I guess I'm Jeremy. I did an undergrad in human kinetics. I have another bachelor's degree in education. I minored in psychology. Yeah, Tim's much more formally trained than I am, but he's trained in the social sciences, so take that for what you will. Um, yeah, I currently work a couple different jobs. I'm a career lead for a landscaping company. I've been a supply teacher for a school board teaching elementary school kids. for about 2 years now. And actually, something Tim doesn't know is as of Wednesday, I just got hired onto the secondary list with the same school board. So now I can teach the secondary kids as well. So
That's sweet.
yeah, it's fun. I probably won't supply teach obviously until next September, but we're aiming that way towards maybe moving to the high school route. So I get to deal with kids a lot, and I feel like I've got a little more grounding in psychology than Tim does, whereas he's a little more on the cultural side of things and the philosophy
Even though
side
you
of things.
just said. But
What?
go on, go on.
Psychology is a social science, but it's a little closer to like a hard science than philosophy and anthropology and those kinds of things. But whatever,
That's debatable, but I mean, that's not what this episode's on.
No, that could be a topic for some other time. So yeah, the idea was basically to do some background research, come up with some questions for each other. We know each other's political leanings a little bit, so like I'm definitely like a little center right, more conservatively minded than Tim. Still pretty liberal, especially when it comes to social issues. But I don't know. Tim's I guess more of what you would call a bleeding heart liberal. Yeah.
Not at all, but you
No.
would say
Okay.
that.
I would say that, wouldn't I? Yeah. So we're a little bit oppositional, and I know Tim liked Bernie, which makes me think that he's gonna be pushing towards the socialism side, but it's not necessarily gonna be representing one side or the other, because I don't want him to represent views that he doesn't necessarily hold, whereas I'm sure he doesn't want me to do the same. So we're more going to discuss, I mean, it'll probably start with discussing some of the merits, but turn into a little bit of antagonistic, but maybe we'll learn something and
Let's
change.
hope so.
I don't know. Maybe the other person will, I don't know. Whatever. Start. Go ahead.
Before we start, you mind reading the message real quick?
What message?
To pause it for a second.
No, you can't pause live streams, Tim.
You said that there was a be right back setting.
There is a be right back setting. All right.
That's what I meant.
Okay, well, be right back. This one. I think the audio's still going through, but I don't know. I gotta. What's up? All right. Well, as we can tell, consummate professionals. First episode, 2 minutes in, and Tim disappeared. Why is this not capping Tim's screen anymore? Oh, there it is. Like I said, professionals. I'm running off like a $300 laptop right now as our main hub, so forgive us if it's a little not so good. Like it takes a second there for the webcam to load in, but it is what it is. So yeah. While Tim's gone, I guess we'll just chug some beers, because that's the idea of the stream, is get a little drunker, and as we go, it gets a little less coherent, but hopefully you guys can follow as much as we can follow. And we gotta update our beer counter while we wait for Tim to come back. I think Tim's on a second one. We had a couple beers while we were chatting ahead of time. It is the first episode, and we'll see how that goes. For now, we're just chilling, hanging out, Hopefully anybody that listens to this, which is like maybe going to be 5 people, is enjoying themselves. Could probably fast forward about 2-3 minutes until Tim gets back. I don't know where he went, but he just dipped out. It's alright, he can take a shit, it's fine. But yeah, it's gonna be a fun one because I don't know. I feel like Tim gets a little butthurt a little easily, so I feel like that's gonna be fun. Change the lighting a little bit. See how that looks. While Tim was gone, we finished another beer. In case you're wondering, beer of choice tonight for me is Kronenberg Blanc.
All right, sorry about that.
Tim's having some Bouches, I think.
And what?
Some Bouches.
Oh, who are you talking to? He's still alive?
Yeah, don't worry. We only need to use the be right back is for if we're both gone. If you just need a break, then I can just fill the space and chat shit to myself.
Okay, well, I just needed to get an extension cord.
Oh boy. See, we're figuring it out. When we were trying to set this up originally, I was trying to run a 100-foot Ethernet cable from like downstairs to the upstairs, and I yeeted my entire internet box off and turned it all off, dropped the Discord call with him, shut everything down. Then I had to figure out how to reconnect my headphones. It's been like a half hour, 40 minutes of just trying to figure out how to get this thing going. So, you know, I consider it a success that we're live. That's a success to me right now.
What?
I said I consider it a success that we're live right now. Consider it.
Yeah, that we're even doing it.
Yeah. It was a bit of a time to figure out. And I'm also on beer 3 now, Tim. Catch up, bud.
I am on 2, so fair enough, but mine are stronger than yours.
What are yours? You're also drinking Tall Boys, right?
Yeah, 5.5.
Attaboy. Well, you're taking it easy tonight. I've got 15 beers, so we'll see if we get through all of them.
Yeah, I got to finish school this weekend, so I'm only having 6.
Yeah. Tim's got to be a responsible boy. I work today, and not so worried about being responsible tomorrow. All right. Do you want to start, or do you want me to start? Yeah, bud.
You start. You're the smart one. This is all yours, remember?
Yeah, all right. So the first and most primary question that I have for you, because like I feel like you lean towards like quote unquote democratic socialist, although I'm not going to ascribe that position to you, and you can touch on that a little bit if you'd like to start off.
Generally, yeah, that's fair.
But I want to ask you, is there a difference between socialism and communism, and if so, what do you believe is the difference?
Okay, well, I guess I'll answer that with the definitional understanding, because it's probably the easiest way to go about it. Communism, generally what most people would ascribe to that model, would be a more equal level society, usually obtained through authoritarian dictatorships. But I don't really necessarily think communism has to be achieved through that method, but a rough equal society that the means of production are within the state as opposed to private. And socialism is slightly different in that it can be combined with a democratic society, whereas most people assume communism can't work with democracy. And democratic socialism is slightly different in that it's an incremental reduction of inequality, and it's like a work in progress. And capitalism is the main difference between those two and capitalism is that everything is run and implemented and orchestrated by private interests and the free market, as opposed to government. And the less amount of government involvement, the better from the capitalist perspective.
Not all of them. Like in anarcho-capitalism, yeah, less government, better. But like, there's plenty of different capitalistic models which, like they advocate for government intervention when it damages greater society. There's plenty of capitalist models that
For sure.
off of that.
I just meant like the rough understanding of capitalism generally. Not there's a bunch of variants. Okay, so what was the second part of your question?
The question wasn't really pertaining to that. It was like, it's just pertaining to socialism versus communism, because in my personal viewpoint there isn't that big of a difference between them. I definitely see a difference, a slight difference, but I see the difference not necessarily where you see it.
The main difference for me is that, well, like, okay, so my idea of communism, I don't think there's much of a difference, but the general view of communism is it goes hand in hand with dictatorships, and the government takes all of the power and makes everyone else equal but suffering, and that's why people tend to not like it. But I don't think that's a bastardization of communism, and socialism is more in line, what I think, with communism as it could be.
Okay, so question then to expand on this would be, is like, to both of them, socialism and communism, is private property allowed in either system?
I feel that in communism, I don't, like, maybe I'm not an expert on it, but I would say more often than not, and at least any ways that communism has actually manifested itself through like history, no. But in socialism, like, yes, I mean, Canada's more or less a like pseudo-socialist state, and there's private property.
I disagree strongly with that, but
Pseudo, that's, I know we're not really, but like that's sort of the direction people tend to think we're going.
Yeah, so the way I kind of see, oh yeah, if we didn't mention, we're both Canadians, by the way.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, just in case we missed it. The way I kind of see it, communism is state ownership of means of production plus abolition of private property, whereas socialism is still state ownership of means of production, but it allows for private property as long as that property isn't used to like expropriate like additional wealth.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I see the difference is when it comes to private property. Both of them, I feel like, involve government ownership of means of production, or like, when we're talking about means of production, we're talking about like capital production and well, where am I going with that? I guess capital production and like production of goods. But yeah, I feel like communism explicitly says no private property, whereas a lot of socialists allow for private property as long as it's not being used in such a way.
The difference would be between private property and private enterprise, I guess. Socialism allows property but not business.
Yeah. And when it comes to Canada being like a socialist country, I disagree strongly with this.
That's why I said pseudo, though.
Yeah, I know pseudo-socialist. So, it's more or less a capitalist country with a economic wealth, or well, not just an economic, but like an economic and social welfare system piggybacking off of the capitalist system. So we have a capitalist economy that's a free market economy, and that's how we produce wealth as a nation. And then we use government, and then we use government intervention to redistribute wealth to the lowest ends in order to bring them up and try and maintain a good standard of living. Like one of the things we try to, as many countries try to, but a lot of it's fucking wasted effort. Like, well, the one thing that I have brought up is the Heritage Foundation's degrees of economic freedom ranking, and like, so they rank all of the countries based off of like economic freedom, based off of like government regulations and obstacles to enterprise. And like Canada's ranked like 7th on that as far as freest nations, as far as as far as economic freedom. Like Canada's ranked 9th, which like the States is ranked like 20th. Like they rank us like what? We have a score of 77.9 and the States is at 74.8. So we're like 5 points higher than the States. We're higher like in economic freedom than like Finland, Netherlands, Iceland, Denmark, like a bunch of
Surprised me. The other ones are kind of surprising, but
well,
I kind of agree with you there. Like, it was a mistake for me to say, like, Canada wants to look like a socialist country, but the core is still, yes, obviously very capitalist. And
I don't
the
even
government
necessarily agree with that.
try. What?
I don't even necessarily agree with that. I think that a large segment of the like cities want to appear as being almost socialist, but most rural communities are like, fuck no, we disagree with that.
Maybe. I can't speak to that.
Like it's
But
like I feel like the whole socialism ideology comes along more with like rural versus urban. The urban centers want to be much more socialist because they have a lot more social problems, and they want to like they end up like rural ends up with a flatter curve when it comes to economic distribution, whereas when you get into cities you end up with much more stratification in like income, and you end up with
yeah.
like massive areas where you have a lot of poor people, and then you end up also with high rises with the richest people in the world paying for, you know what, in Toronto you can get like a loft apartment for a couple $1,000,000 for a fucking 1-bedroom apartment.
And then rural areas are generically farmers who would prefer a capitalist mentality.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even say necessarily all farmers, but yeah.
Not all farmers, but a good portion.
No, I know.
Privately interested, self-sustaining folks.
Yeah. Yeah, more or less. So, like, would you agree then that Canada is a free market economy and primarily capitalist in its means of production, but we have social welfare programs in which we use to help out the less fortunate people within our society?
Yeah, I do agree with that. That's what I was trying to say with how we try, like the second part. It's a very much veiled, like kind of half-assed attempt to act like from the government's perspective, like the social welfare concerns almost always take a long time to be pushed through. They're only the first agenda in public, it seems. So Canada wants to look more socialist than we actually are.
Yeah, we want to appear because socialism, I feel like, plays heavily on the emotional side of things, whereas capitalist is more like numbers driven, and like so playing on the fact that we're trying to play on people's emotions. You know, you want to appear as being the better person by pushing for more social policies, but at the end of the day, I feel like a lot of Western countries just it's all facade, and they're all just trying to appear as it. Whereas it's not actually doing
foundationally they're still driven by capital.
And foundationally, I don't necessarily believe that socialism even is the more moral system. I just think that there's a lot of dumbasses that haven't studied history enough to understand what socialism's done in the past.
It's to even say that any system of economics has a moral rating is just a flawed way to look at it, in my opinion. Like, neither of them are more moral than the other. It's who has control of the system and what they do with it. The only reason people think capitalism is less moral is because of the image of the dollar and that being the only value. That inherently seems not concerned with people, but it could be depending on who controls it.
Yeah, so that was actually one of my questions later on was, should our economic systems be moral? Should they have a moral philosophy? So I guess we'll touch on that a little bit right now, which, like, you're saying that they don't necessarily have a moral thing, but you literally just said before that Canada wants to seem more socialist, and like, why would they want to seem more socialist other than the fact that it is perceived more to be a more moral system?
Yeah, no, I don't disagree that they're used to imply morals, but inherently, I don't think you can attach morals to the systems themselves until they're in play in reality. So yes, because everybody thinks socialism is already morally people focused, a government that's trying to seem moral and people focused will try to seem more in line with that. Like, even if it's not really in the end true, like, I don't know. That it's not about the things themselves, it's about what people do with them.
I agree. I was actually listening to an interesting lecture about that today, and it was called what was it called? It was called Fake Socialism versus Real Capitalism, and it was how a lot of people like compare like realistic capitalism and how it functions in the real world to an idealistic version of socialism. They say, see, socialism's better only if all these people would act better, then socialism would function way better. But we're going to compare that to like how capitalism actually functions, and that's like kind of actually a disanalogous comparison because you're comparing apples to grapes. You're not actually comparing apples to apples.
Question along that line, like hypothetically, one of the biggest arguments people always bring up about communism or like the negative aspects of it is like, look at what's happened when we've had communist systems. And then the argument against that by other people supporting communism is, if ideally we had a trustworthy egalitarian government that was in control and implied or implemented communism, then it would work. So yeah, I agree. It's easy to say that ideally that's right, but it's never played out that way. And capitalism, even if there's issues with how it's been playing out, it does still function, and there is positives that we can see so far. So I agree with you again, weirdly.
Yeah, so let's play that thought experiment out a little bit more. So because we've seen quote unquote real socialism, like I believe it's real socialism, whether you do or not, of like some of the atrocities.
Hold on. Communism, yes, but what example of socialism are you thinking of?
Well, all of the quote unquote communist countries I also consider to be socialist. At least in their inception, they were socialist before going complete totalitarian route. And like,
I see, we disagree right away, so we got to solve that before we go on. Like, I feel that the communists, like Russia, Cuba, the normal examples, there's never any socialist
Venezuela,
mentality.
China, Germany, the Democratic
Maybe
Socialist
China
Party.
right now, but I don't know enough about current Chinese government to use that example. But I'm going to focus on Russia, the Soviet Union, because it's an easy one. Like, it was always what?
Yeah, like Stalin was huge into Marx, and he considered himself to be a Marxist socialist when he took over. Like he might have implemented more of a totalitarian regime, but that was also because he himself was a brutal individual. Like dude murdered people on the side before he became powerful. Like that was just his natural tendency.
But that's what I'm saying. There never wasn't the totalitarian aspect. There was like, yeah, maybe he has personal socialism based beliefs, but that never came, like, that was never part of the system. It was always authoritarian run communism, but that authoritarian background is what allowed him to get into that position to implement his communism.
Okay, okay. Disagreements there, but okay, what do you think about when Lenin ran the country then, before Stalin took over from Lenin?
I mean, it's pretty stereotypical, I guess, of left-wing humanities students, but I obviously feel that Lenin is better and a more apt example of the positive aspects of communism than Stalin. I mean, Lenin wasn't as, like, clearly a brutal fucking dictator, but
so what is
okay.
Is the difference between socialism and communism's implementation that they're the exact same ideology, but one requires a brutal dictator and the other one has somebody who's slightly better but still a totalitarian jackass?
No, not quite. Like I said before, communism, as it's generally understood, requires, like the mainstream view, it requires the authoritarian government in order to implement it, which I don't necessarily think that's the only way you can come to a communism model. But regardless, what the difference for me between the two is that communism is like everybody's at the same level, and how you get there is irrelevant for my point. Whereas socialism, and especially democratic socialism, is a process of incremental reduction of inequalities, constantly working through it. And you like to get everybody at equal point, especially hypothetically, if we did that right now, obviously it makes more sense that an authoritarian system would be able to do that easily. They have every say, take everything away. So that's the only way to get there is people's view. Whereas democratic socialism would be a constant reworking and like attempt at making things more equal.
See, I don't view that as like I don't believe in the concept of democratic socialism. Like I think socialism and communism both require a revolutionary act in order to buy in, because you're all like both of them are fairly totalitarian. Like both of them exclude private enterprise in its entirety because they see it as morally wrong. So
Yeah, well, no,
so there's always going to be people that don't necessarily agree. So I don't believe there's a proper democratic way in order to reach a socialistic endpoint. I believe they're both require revolutions in order to implement.
I mean, disagree with a couple parts of that. I agree with, like, I see where you're coming from. I agree with the overall mindset, but in order, like, that revolutionary aspect is why it seems like you're fitting into the view that I'm giving to most people that disagree with communism. Like, that revolution would be what starts the new government, which is authoritarian and makes it that way, which, okay, that's not good. And that view of communism, I wouldn't want either. But like democratic socialism is extremely difficult to imagine and implement. And that's why I don't really think there's any good examples, and why Canada, at best, like, we've shown signs of trying to do things that are in that vein, and that's why it's difficult. The revolution, the instant change, would make it more obvious to see, but that won't work. It's a long process, and it's hard to imagine that, but that doesn't mean it's not possible.
Yeah, so I'm all for incrementalism when it comes to change and stuff. I just think you're attributing that to democratic socialism, but honestly, I think that's just democracy in general is all about incremental change. I think that's the democratic part of democratic socialism.
No, I agree. What I'm saying is that communism can't have that with it. So that's the difference for me.
Yeah. And like there have been revolutions in the past in which led to democracy, where there was overthrows of dictators in order for free and fair elections. So it's not just that revolutions always lead to totalitarianism. They've been used against totalitarianism.
No, I know, but I was just thinking from Canadian perspective that we already have democracy. So a revolution from where we are now would be in the opposite direction.
I mean, the States seem pretty revolutionary right now, and they have democracy. So,
yeah, and where did it almost go to? A dictatorship.
Now, where is it gonna go to? In what? There's 2.5 weeks left in the George Floyd trial, and then there's gonna be mass carnage.
If something doesn't happen, then it'll be like a couple months until Biden dies, and then something will happen.
Yeah, I don't know. We're not going to talk about that because American Politics is the best sitcom on TV, and you can go to whichever news station you want to watch that sitcom.
Yep, exactly. I was trying to say, regardless of whether you disagree with my explanations, was my understanding of the differences between communism and socialism is more or less centered around the democratic applicability to each.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. I just think that's like I feel like it's a stretch to pull the socialism part into it, and that it's the thing that you're talking about is not uniquely ascribed to democratic socialism. It's just ascribed to democracy, and that's the democratic part of socialism. Like, yeah, okay, like I understand, I know we're going over this a bit again, but like I understand that you're saying like through democracy implementing more social programs, but this comes back to what I was saying earlier, which is like it's still a capitalist economy implementing more socialist programs. Unless you're gonna have the government seize the means of production, I don't think it's can be defined as a socialist society. Unless the government fully does that. And there's always going to be people that resist that, which is why it's going to require some sort of totalitarianism to implement any kind of socialism.
Okay, I have a couple points, but I probably won't be able to get them all out before we get sidetracked. So the main thing, just hypothetically, do you think like, so your full understanding of socialism would be 100% government control of means of production. Capitalism, full private control of means of production. Yeah?
No,
Just yes or
no,
no?
no,
Okay, well then, okay, anyways, my question,
no.
do you
Okay,
think the possibility, what?
before we move on, socialism, like, yes, I agreed with the socialist part. Socialism, yes, is government control of means of production. Capitalism doesn't
100%.
necessarily.
That's my,
Yes, 100%.
okay.
I think that's definitionally a working understanding of socialism. Capitalism, I
Okay.
don't think is that much of a totalitarian idea. Like, for example, in Canada, we have a mixed economy. We have the social programs, we have capitalist programs, like our healthcare is a socialized healthcare, but it is also a way in which a lot of people make a lot of fucking money, right? We have a mixed economy. I think social programs and socialism itself can exist in parts within a capitalist, like an
That,
overarching capitalist dominion, but
okay,
I
that's where I'm
don't think
kind of
vice
going.
versa is necessarily true.
Okay, that's irrelevant then. What I was going to ask is, do you think it's possible for it to be like 50-50 or 40-60? But so then if it's 51%, I know that you're not going to actually ever be able to get to these specifics, but 51% socialist economy and 49% capitalist, like,
Like,
is it still a mixed economy or is that a socialist economy?
if it's any percentage capitalist, it's still a mixed economy. Okay, so this is why I actually pulled up the numbers just beforehand. I was interested in Canada per se. So the common measurement of spending as a percentage of GDP puts the size of government at 44% of the total economy in Canada. So in Canada, the government alone is 44% of our total economy. Add in measures of tax expenditure, which is 10.1%, and regulations on business, which is 10.5%, and you end up at the size of the government being 64% of the total GDP.
Okay, so then why do you think, so if it was 99% of GDP, and like, why does it have to be fully 100 in order to be considered a socialist economy?
Um, because I think that's definitionally what socialism is collective ownership of means of production. I think that's the definition. Like, for me, maybe it's not for everybody, maybe it's not for you. I
Okay,
think
but
definitely, just let me finish. I think definitionally what socialism is okay. It doesn't even necessarily need to be the government ownership. Like a lot of people peg it into the government ownership. I don't necessarily think that. I just think it has to be collective ownership by the society. Whether you're doing a co-op or some other thing like that, or some other social program that's owned by multiple like large groups, as long as there's collective ownership by the society. I think that's definitionally what socialism is, though, is that it's a collective ownership of something, which it entails in itself excluding any kind of private enterprise. So it has to be 100% excluding private enterprise for it to be socialist, definitionally, in my opinion.
I just feel like it worked, like, possibly, I don't disagree with that, but then on the other side, capitalism is private individuals are free to do as they please economically without any restrictions, and the lesser government involvement the better, but mainly
No, that's
it'd be
ANCAPs.
ideal. What?
That's an ANCAP, anarcho-capitalism. Like that, ANCAPs advocate for like zero government regulations and all that. I'm like, there's plenty like most capitalists understand that, hey, guess what, the environment's a shit show and we need the government to regulate companies so that they don't fucking destroy the environment. Like I
I mean,
think
you like
like
healthcare, right?
what
You obviously like healthcare, right? So
I do like healthcare. Like I am like there's I think maybe 3% of all people that are capitalists would say they're anarcho-capitalists, where it's just free trade, laissez-faire, free trade where you can do whatever the fuck you want. I think most people say free trade, but there needs to be government regulations. Like we need to have regulations on monopolies, for example, because that basically destroys free trade. Like there needs to be a government uh, fingerprint within the free trade
yeah,
system in order to regulate it and make it a viable system. It's just to what extent is that to what extent should it be used in order to maximize effectiveness of the system?
yeah. See, okay, I more or less agree with that, but capitalism, I feel, is more extreme. What I would term that is just the general libertarian view.
Uh, yes and no. I think it has a separate definition because it is separate. I think a lot of libertarians go towards, government keep their hands out of my whatever, right? And like, yeah,
Economically,
they probably lean a lot more towards that, but I think a lot of them also recognize the need for government in like two major areas where I think libertarians would be okay with the government intervening is in two of the things I already said, which is monopolization, because that's extremely anti-competitive and forces out like a lot of businesses, and then the other one being environmental regulations because we all share the same environment. Like it comes
yeah.
down to when your practice starts to harm others, then it is no longer okay. Then the libertarians are very okay with you can do whatever the fuck you want in capitalism as long as you don't harm others. Once you start hurting other
Or
people, well, yeah,
yeah.
once you start directly harming other people, now all of a sudden it's not okay, and that's when we need government intervention. That's where I think the libertarian thing is, and what the difference between libertarianism and anarcho-capitalism is anarcho-capitalism is laissez-faire, do whatever you want, whereas the libertarians say do whatever you want until the point when you start interrupting into other people's lives, and then that becomes the problem.
Okay, fair enough. But still, so the anarcho. Oh my god, I can't even say that word. Whatever.
Just call them an
Libertarian is
ANCAP.
ANCAP. ANCAP is more extreme than libertarian, but they're more or less the same. One is just a bit further. That's all I was trying to say. But now I lost my other point. Okay, you go on. I agree.
Okay, so I guess we hang up a bit on the issue of the definition of socialism. I guess we could so the thing the big difference I think like I see and you see, and one of the differences we have is that like I see capitalism as being a more permissive system and allows for other systems to exist in smaller sectors within it as long as the overarching system is capitalist. Whereas I believe socialism to be a totalitarian ideology because if you do not have 100% buy-in into the system literally doesn't work.
Okay, that's what I was going to say then. Yes, we do disagree on our definitions of socialism because I feel that it doesn't necessarily matter the exact ratio, but why I would be more inclined to say Canada is essentially a socialist country, even though we're capitalists at our core, is because of the way we orchestrate ourselves culturally is 51 to 49%. Like, we're only capitalist in our economic dealings, which I understand we're talking about economics, but
wow.
I don't think fuck up. But I don't think socialism has to be 100% to be considered socialist. Like,
no, but I think a lot of like socialism itself, I don't think. Okay, socialism I think produces economic stagnation rather than prosperity. So where capitalism allows, well, you can whatever you want, right? Like where capitalism allows like some flourishing in there, and other systems to branch out from it. Like, yeah, you could have a 30% capitalist system, and as long as that 30% is like your exports, for example, then your country's going to be making more money. When you socialize things, like okay, I know you don't agree, but for example, Venezuela, when they socialized their oil industry, they fucking tanked the whole country.
But that's
if Canada socialized its lumber industry, which is one of our biggest industries, I think that would do irreparable damage to the country. If the government all of a sudden said we should own it, like the NDP right now wants to abolish privatized what is it like elderly care facilities. They want to get rid of elderly care facilities as a private enterprise, and they want to make it entirely government funded. Like they want to make it government control over all long-term care facilities. And
okay.
And like I think when the government sticks its finger into something, like I think the prices of the long-term care facilities will go up naturally because you're going to end up with a bunch of bureaucrats regulating it, and you need to pay all their salaries. Two, you're going to end up with a lower standard of care, even though they go, oh, well, they don't have any like regulations. They don't have any like standards for this is how good it needs to be, blah, 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 blah. No, their standard for how good it has to be is I need to make money. So the higher standard of care I can provide, the more people will come sign up to my long-term care facility. Whereas when I think the government gets involved and puts, okay, this is a standard, everybody's just going to meet the standard. Nobody's going to go above and beyond the standard. You're not going to be able to find this, like, okay, I've got more money. I want to put my mom, who's now 80, into a much better care facility because she needs a little more extra help. No, everybody's at this level. There's no variation. And I think that's going to lead to one
standard level, though, is optimal. Like, I agree with what you're saying. That makes perfect sense. But in the capitalist sense of that, most people aren't going to be able to afford the optimal expensive level, so you're going to get shitty quality regardless. If the standard of the government system is high enough that everybody gets the same good quality, then that would be better. Both of these are hypothetical ways that could both be right and both be wrong. So
I think the overall cost of the system, though, is going to go up in general because of the introduction of like people within the government that are going to have to regulate the standards. You're going to introduce more people than already work in the homes because there's already somebody there at the individual home that upholds a certain standard care, right? Like there's somebody who's at that long-term care facility who's like, okay, this is the standard that we espoused to have. We need to keep up with this. You're not doing your job. You're not doing your job. You need to do better. This is our standard. And they make sure that everybody meets it. They're going to have that at the individual level, but then also within the government, they're going to have another, 20, 30 people per province that are going to need to go around and make sure that those people are also doing their job. So I think adding those additional salaries is actually going to increase the cost to the society. Yes, it'll be free because it'll now be part of healthcare, but where does that money come from? Oh, taxation. The government doesn't actually make any money on its own. It just takes money from other people.
But that comes into another disagreement we're obviously going to get to or have is I don't have an issue with raising taxes for certain things. And I feel like you out and out don't want taxes to be higher or as high as they are.
Okay.
I'm willing to raise taxes for that purpose specifically.
Before we go into this, I think we're going to agree on this, but I'd just like to know your opinion on it. Progressive tax versus flat tax, and like what should be the tax brackets if you're advocating for a progressive tax.
So I'm just going to be ignorant and stupid right now. You're going to have to explain those differences to me.
All right, so flat tax, ignorant and stupid, I love it. So flat tax is everybody gets taxed X percentage. So say we call it 25%. So you make $10,000. You make $10,000. The government takes $2,500 of that. You make $100,000. The government takes $25,000 of that. Flat percentage rate based off your income. Progressive tax is the more money you make, which Canada runs on a progressive tax system. The States does. Most first world countries do. There's plenty of conservatives that advocate for a flat tax. I think it's wrong. Progressive tax is where it's at. It's just where should the tax brackets be. So it's just the more money you make, the more of it as a percentage the government takes from you. So like you make $30,000 in Canada, the government takes 0% from you. You make $50,000, government takes 20.
You move up a bracket.
20%, 22% or something like that. Actually, we're gonna quickly Google it and see what the Canada tax brackets are.
Okay, but then in the flat tax,
but
there's no brackets for flat tax.
What's up? No, flat tax is everybody gets taxed the exact same percentage, but because people make differing amounts of money, they get taxed different dollar values, but they're still getting taxed the exact same percentage of their overall income.
So it's a different percentage per bracket, whereas no matter what you make in flat tax, it's the same.
Yeah. So like people advocate for a flat tax, but it's like honestly at a certain point, like you've got enough fucking money and you can afford to give up a larger percentage. Like I believe in progressive tax, which I figured. All right, start that again because like when we both we're on a little bit of delay, and when we both talk at the same time, you get really garbled to me. So go for it.
From where? Start from where again?
Just like 5 seconds before what you were saying.
Okay, just the opinion you're putting forward right now is more left-leaning than I've heard from you generally, but I agree with you that yes, it doesn't surprise me that many conservatives are in favor of the flat tax, but I think
I wouldn't say many. I would say like maybe 10%.
whatever you just said about conservatives preferring that, whatever word you used, doesn't surprise me. But the opposite, I think, just makes more sense and is more fair.
Yeah,
The only people that would disagree with that is the 1% that doesn't want to pay. Like, yeah, they're paying more money because they have more money.
yeah, but there's also like a lot of the small business owners will restrict their growth in order to stay in a certain tax bracket. Like for
Yeah,
example, when I was younger, what was he? He was a massage therapist, I guess. I want to say physio, but I guess he was a massage therapist. He worked on me when I was in like grade 11, 12 area. I was playing football, and he
you sure he
literally
wasn't
told me, "What?"
sure he wasn't a priest?
Yeah, no, he wasn't. And like he literally told me at one point, he's like, "Yeah, I could work an extra 10 hours a week and I would make this amount more money." He's like, "But then I would go into the next tax bracket." And he's like, "If I go into the next tax bracket, I actually make less money overall." Because he was at the top of one tax bracket as a percentage. So like because it runs on ranges. So for example, like 50,000 to 100,000, you're getting taxed whatever 22% or something like that,
But
right?
then 100,001, you'd be getting taxed way more.
20, you go from 22% up to 28%, and all of a sudden you're actually making less money, even though you're bringing in more money as a business. You're actually making less net after taxes. So he was like, "Yeah, I'm not going
I
to work the
understand
extra
that, but I
hours."
don't see the issue.
You don't see the issue. Like okay, like I still advocate for progressive taxes, but you don't see there being an issue with a progressive tax system that disincentivizes businesses to grow.
What way would you be able, like, unless you're making a big growth each time, like, what way could that, do you have that kind of system? Like, you're not disincentivizing growth, you're just making it so that businesses have to be very specifically attentive to their growth.
Uh,
Like, like I said, if it was from 100,000 and then they stay in the lower bracket and then they move to 100,001, like obviously that's not how it would be, but and then they'd move higher and they'd get taxed more. Obviously, you wouldn't want to grow that little amount and lose more money. But if you could grow to 150,000 and then make enough so that the change in the deduction, you'd be making more money, then you're still growing. You wouldn't be not incentive. You wouldn't have the incentive to not. You wouldn't not have the incentive to do that. You know what I mean? Like you just have to pay more attention as a business.
it takes a lot of finagling, and you kind of have to go boom or bust at that point. That it's like you hold back and you hold back until you're sure you can jump enough that it is worth it to go ahead. I think
Exactly.
yeah. So I still think it disincentivizes natural. Okay, sorry. Let's reframe this then. Rather than disincentivizing growth, I think it disincentivizes natural growth.
It makes you have to pay more attention. So yeah, you can't just let it go by itself, but you shouldn't be doing that if you're running a business anyways.
Well, no. You,
Like you
you
should be paying
can.
attention to the
You
finance.
you should be paying attention to finances, which is why he limited his hours so that he would make more money. But I'm saying like it's still. How do I phrase this? That like I think like it like the word natural growth. Like a business naturally grows as you have more customers, those customers tell more people, you have more people come in, and it disincentivizes, say for example, longer hours like he had, or if it was a small business like hardware store or something, and he's like, yeah, I can stay open an extra 2 hours, I'll make $10,000 more net at the end of the year, but I'm gonna pay an extra 6% in taxes, which on my overhead of 200,000, that becomes $12,000. So I actually lost $2,000 to work an extra 2 hours a night. So I think it
Yeah,
disincentivizes like the natural growth and the push towards it, and requires you to basically have like a dam structure in which you hold back growth until such a point which you can flood the market, which
yeah,
doesn't necessarily work.
no, but I don't see why that. Like obviously that's not amazing, but I don't see how that taxing system could work without it being that way. And I don't think it's really that bad. Like, yeah, it's
there's a
annoying, frustrating, but that would only be for portions of your time running the business. There'd be other portions where you'd be more flush.
there's there's a way that I think would work a little bit better, which is shrinking the tax brackets. So like we can go through right now quickly.
Okay.
Like for example, so Canada, 48,535 or less, you're paying 15% of your income. 48,535 to $97,069, you're paying 20.5% of your income. Which honestly, if I'm making less than $100,000, I'm giving 20 grand of that to the government. I'm pissed, but regardless, 97,000
Sure,
basically a hundred. Well, yeah, that's what it is. Like 97,000, yada yada yada, to 150,000 is 26%. Then it goes 150,000 to like 215,000 is 29%, and then more than 215,000 is 33%. Mind you, this is just federal income tax. It doesn't include any provincial, which I don't know whether Canada has provincial. I know the states have state taxes. I'm sure we have. Sure, we have provincial, but regardless, the one thing that I think could help this would be having smaller tax brackets. So rather than having these 50,000 leaps every 10,000, and then you went 50,000 up, now you're paying 6% more, rather than having that massive leap. Every 10,000 up, you pay 1% more. Why can't we do that? So every $10,000 more you make, you're paying like basically $1,000 more to the government. So you make $70,000, whatever you're paying, or sorry, we'll start at 50,000. So 50,000, you're paying 20% to the government. So 20% of 50,000 is what, 10 grand? And then you make it 60,000. Okay, it goes up 1%. Now you're paying 11 grand to the government, right? So you went from netting 40,000 to netting 49,000. Rather than having these massive tax brackets that jump 5 to 6% at a time, I think reducing the bracket size would actually help incentivize entrepreneurship personally.
Okay, I think that is a good way to approach the issue. I agree in that sense. Like, my first thought was, wouldn't that just change the time frame of the same issue? But even if that, I still kind of think that, but I feel that doing what you're saying is a good way to go about it. But I think the higher you get, like, it should just be lower percentages on the lower brackets, and it goes up maybe, like you said, 1% for a period, and then once you get over there should be a jump at a certain point. Once you make a certain large amount of money, you should be it should be a bigger percentage. But from say 90 to 150, there could be a huge difference. And then once it goes up a bunch, then it goes back to just small incremental changes. That's all I would add to what you're.
I could see larger brackets once you're pushing past like 250,000, probably about 250,000.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the smaller jumps mean it's less, right? Like when you're jumping from whatever 97,000 to 98,000, you go from 20% to 26%. You're all of a sudden, you're losing a lot of money.
Yeah,
whatever that is, difference. Right? That's a big difference versus where if you went from 80,000, or sorry, say we'll go 90,000 to 100,000. So 90,000, you're already paying 25%, and now 100,000, you're paying 26%. I think the incremental change would make it a lot more palatable from people. And honestly, I think the government would pull in more money out of that because they can tax slightly higher. We'll come back. So I gotta take a piss. We'll come back to you're gonna advocate for why we should have higher taxes in general to fund our social programs, and I'm interested to hear your argument about this. So we'll come back to that.
Sure.
What?
That's not the greatest explanation, but sure.
No,
in that sense.
That's generally what you were saying. So we'll come back to that in 2 seconds. Yeah. All right. We better update this beer tracker. So yeah, I mean, uh, Tim did say that he thinks we should have higher taxes in general. So I'm interested to see what he says about that. Coming back, you know, I'm sure he'll make a fair argument. At the end, we're gonna play some chess. I'm sure nobody's gonna want to fucking watch that or anything like that. But if you'd like to stick around at the end, Tim and I used to be really competitive. We played, if anybody knows Magic the Gathering, which I'm sure lots of people do, we used to play a bunch of Magic the Gathering when we were younger. And yeah, we're going to play some chess because Magic the Gathering was our hyper competitive outlet when we were in university. And we're going to play chess as our hyper competitive outlet this time and see how that goes. We need to update the I asked him where he's at because I am currently on beer 4. We got this one that I'm working on, and then we got the 3 empties right here. So we're on number 4. See how that goes. I really hope this records clean because it's been hella fun so far. And yeah, I know we got some shitty webcams. I've got a decent fucking microphone. Tim's got a medium microphone, but we both got shit webcams.
You're a medium.
Sorry for that, but you know, it is what it is.
They don't forgive you.
What?
They don't forgive you.
You don't forgive me.
They don't.
That's all right. Nobody's watching, so. I'm on 4. Where are you at, Tim? Are you on 3 now?
Just finished 3.
Just finished 3. You're cracking open 4?
This is 4.
Attaboy. Yeah, we're about halfway through 4. Did you like the picture? Actually, you can't even see it. So the picture I picked for our background image is Bender and Homer with beers cheersing. And I've been thinking
That's
about
fair.
Yeah, I've been thinking about asking Terry if he'd do something for us, whether it's a logo or some sort of image to use as like our like profile picture, if you would. Think about asking Terry. Terry's one of our buddies who's an artiste.
He draws pretty well. I think that's a good idea.
He draws some
What
nice
did you
stuff.
say the podcast was again?
What?
What did you say the name of the podcast was again?
Drinking beers and grinding gears. So, in case we don't get the reference, because Tim apparently doesn't get the reference, there was a Family Guy episode where Peter was the host of this show, and it was called what was it even called? And I don't even know what it was called. But he used to just go, oh, you know what really? Yeah, he used to go, you know what really grinds my gears, and he would just say things that pissed him off. So the idea was to say things that would piss Tim off or piss me off, and drink beers while we grind each other's gears. That was the idea, at least. Whether it functions or not is another thing. Aren't you happy that I brought in the Canada tax brackets and didn't make you lay out your own percentages? So that could have been real sloppy. Tim. I can't hear Tim right now. Why can I not hear Tim? Quick second. Disconnect the pods. I think they might have died. Honestly, we're going to disconnect these for a little bit and Tim, speak your words. Not headset speakers. Hello? Why is that not working? I hate life. The AirPods should have lasted longer than an hour. They must have been really fucking shittily charged. Alright, I'm gonna switch that. Switch this. This. Tim, you there, bud? Is he there? That's the real question. He is not there. His picture is blank. I think it's connected again. Whether I can hear Tim or not is another thing. It says Discord volumes. A decent volume. Anywho, we'll wait for Tim to come back and yell some more. Oh, yeah. If you haven't tried this beer as well, Fantastico. Kronenberg Blanc. It's like a nice orangey, like citrusy beer. Not super citrusy, but it's got a nice like summery feel to it. And the fact that it was 21 today while I was doing some landscaping, fuck yeah, I'm ready for a couple of nice citrusy beers. It was a fun day of sitting on a bobcat doing nothing. Are you there? Can we hear you? Nope, we cannot hear you. Fuck sakes. Alright, disconnect the AirPods. Give it a second. Reconnect the AirPods. Work, you bastards. Hello? Can you hear me? You can hear me, but I can't hear you. I hate life so much. I hate Discord's audio settings. Alright, we're gonna disconnect this. Just skip ahead like 2 minutes because Tim and I are just fucking with audio stuff. It was doing so good for so long. We tried so hard and got so far, but in the end, nothing ever matters. Discord, give me the thingy. Tell me which. I wish I knew how to mess with this program more. Hello? Tim, talk your face off.
Hello.
Hey, he's there. He's back. All right.
Hello.
We're live again. I wish I had a video editing software to cut that out. Anywho, welcome back to the life of people that are streaming for the first time ever.
It's all Jeremy's fault.
Yeah, it is my fault considering I'm the one that has to do everything. All right, you're going to tell us why we need to pay more taxes.
Well, you just said you have to do everything, so that's included.
All right, the reason you have to pay more taxes is because the government are greedy and they want to pay more to themselves.
See, I don't really, that's part of it, sure. But you're misrepresenting my position just from the beginning. I don't think, in general, we should pay more tax.
You literally said that. You literally said that you
No.
You're going to watch it back and you're going to see. You said, I think taxes should be higher anyway.
Oh, I think taxes should be higher when it's for things like healthcare or elder service. I don't think taxes should just be automatically higher every time the government wants to make them higher. I don't like paying taxes, but I'm totally on board with it when it gets me free doctor visits and hospital visits, right? Like, I'm completely on board with taxes being raised for things that are worth it.
Yes, but the thing with raising taxes is the fact that you don't necessarily get to decide what the taxes are spent on.
For sure.
That's the issue. So that's where like the libertarian and the more conservative argument comes from was stay the fuck out of my business, take less of my money, I'll decide where to spend my own money.
Okay, but how many perfectly healthy American libertarians are there? I know there's probably plenty, but like my point is irrelevant. Like,
what about Canadian ones?
There's not that many Canadian libertarians relative to American libertarians.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. I think the whole idea of libertarianism gets misconstrued a little too.
All I'm saying is, like, yeah, we don't know for sure that what percentage of our taxes are going towards paying for healthcare, but that doesn't bother me when I weigh it against having healthcare, right? So
do you think we should? Do you think we should know what percentage of our taxes go towards paying
healthcare?
Yeah,
I wouldn't be opposed to having that given to citizens, but that's like, sure, yeah, for sure. But that's a complicated, like, to get those numbers, who's actually going to go through and read them all? Like,
that's, oh my God, I think that's what we pay journalists to do. To actually do their fucking research. Is you're supposed to do the research before you report it to me. Holy crap. Like,
so I don't think the government is withholding that information from us.
Yes, are you kidding me? Okay, but Trudeau's administration didn't put out a federal budget for 2 years straight. They're literally purposely withholding how they're spending the money during the pandemic, of all things. Like,
yeah.
What do you mean you don't think it's purposely being withheld from us? It is.
Not as a concept. I don't think that, like, it is supposed to be given to us if we want to look for it. Yes, that happened, and I'm not obviously fuck Trudeau for doing that, but it's not actively being told that we're not going to be able to get that information all the time.
Yeah, I think we both agree that more government transparency would be a good thing, and especially when it comes to the tax dollars, of understanding. I think I wonder how much information really is out there as far as like I know there's a lot of money as far as government expenditures, but I'd be interested to see like what like net taxes are versus government expenditures, to see what percentage of total money the government intake is being spent in each realm versus what I was looking up, and what I saw was government expenditures as a percentage of GDP, and it's like, well, not all GDP is held by the government. A lot of it's held by private citizens. So I'd like to see, as a percentage of the net intake of the government, what percentage of that is spent, and then an actual dollar value.
I agree there too, and further than that, even if you looked at a breakdown of all this information, what amount of it is going to be presented as a coverall section that holds a bunch of different percentages and is stated as this expenditure instead of specifically saying the lower level specifics and really not telling you anything. So yes, we do agree that more transparency is ideal.
Yeah.
But there's also factors that go into these things that even if we understand how they work, we're not involved, and there's certain things that make it harder than it seems that it should be for these things to happen for the general citizen. Not defending, like, because I agree that this should happen, but there's also aspects that we don't fully comprehend.
Yeah, so there's some interesting I like to talk about, I guess, that I hadn't really thought about beforehand, but it's kind of interesting with what we are talking about when it comes to you're talking about higher taxes, especially when it comes to like healthcare and stuff like that. So,
I'm not just before you go on. I am not in favor of higher taxes. Full stop. Like,
no, I know. You're saying like if you're willing to pay higher taxes, it meant like better healthcare system.
and we were specifically talking about the elderly homes, and I'd be fine with paying more taxes for certain things such as that, but I do not want to pay more in general. Now you can
So,
go on.
so yeah, so the general conservative, libertarian, whatever, because they're both the same. Like when it comes to this, they're relatively similar. Like is the lower taxes because I know how to spend my own money better than the government knows how to spend my money, right?
Even if I
So
don't, they shouldn't be allowed to spend my money, kind of thing.
yeah, so would you agree that uh, older people tend to have a lot more accrued wealth than younger people?
Well, yeah, because they've had more time.
Yes. Would you also agree that older people tend to consume a lot larger portion of healthcare services than younger people,
Yeah, because they're in lesser health generally.
right?
Okay.
So like the whole socialized healthcare system basically runs on the fact of you're gonna pay for the healthcare that you're gonna use when you're 80, when you're 20, because when you're 20, you're paying for all those older people that are consuming, like probably what, like 50% of all healthcare services are consumed by like people over 75, I would assume, and
Maybe that's a bit high, but sure.
but like obviously they're not producing any wealth at that point in their life, and they're consuming a lot more of the healthcare system. So you're I mean, it's just an interesting concept that like socialized healthcare runs on paying an upfront cost for a later benefit, for later gratification, I guess.
Sure.
Do you think it would be okay then to say I don't want to pay into the like healthcare system because I'll just save my own money, and therefore if I need it, then I should have saved the money myself. And if I would rather spend it on something, for example, on home improvements or something like that, then that is my own personal choice.
Okay, I don't necessarily disagree with that concept, but say, like, so if one person felt that way and every other person in the country wanted it to be the opposite or not be that way, like the possibility of making it work based on certain people feeling that way, it's just too complicated. And I think having it all not like that make it's better for everybody relative. Like there's going to be a higher percent of people that won't have their own ability to do that, so they're covered. And the people that may not want to pay in because they'll save it themselves, like, yeah, it sucks that you don't get to do it the way you specifically want to do it, but you're still going to be covered. So because it's way too complicated to do it otherwise, I think this is the best alternative.
But they might not get what they put into it. So like this is the whole like down in the states, down the
Then, I guess.
sorry, go ahead again because you cut up.
Be less individually focused. Yeah, they might not fully get every dollar they put into it returned, but the most amount of people will. Like the higher percentage of people will benefit. Yeah, maybe you won't benefit as much as you could have if it was your own saved money, but there will be a huge portion of people that don't suffer a lot because everybody is closer to level. So if you focus individually, yeah, you're going to not want to do it. But if you think about the bigger picture, it works out better.
Yeah, I mean, this is like the whole argument down in the states of like privatized versus um, public healthcare systems. And what do you think of what they have right now, where you have a private healthcare system and a public option in like Medicaid? So like people that can't afford Medicare, especially like Medicaid is specifically meant for elderly people that are 65 plus. So what do you think of having the private versus the public option, like later on, and then when you're younger, everything's privatized, and then they still offer medical assistance to disadvantaged households, like lower income households when they're younger, just like Medicaid specifically meant for basically save their money properly to pay for their health services.
Okay. First, I think the 65 being the range, like the cutoff when you're elderly, should be changed, and it should be 28 because I can't bend down and stand back up without feeling like I need new knees. So that's a stupid range. Secondly, I think that is, in theory, a good way to do it. I mean, I don't know enough about the American system, healthcare system, to have much to say on that. I know that I don't enjoy everything that I've heard, but that feature seems reasonable-ish.
Yeah, like Medicaid is like a subsidized program specifically meant for the elderly. So like they have a generally privatized system, and most people get their private insurance through their employer. So
Right.
they pay their employer specifically takes off a percentage of their income to pay for better privatized insurance, and they have options to have different health insurers, so they can have better health insurance and have more of their income taken, and they can have a worse health insurer and have less of their income taken, right?
Right.
But then they have a little bit of choice in there, and then as they get older, like you don't have health insurance through your employer once you're retired, which is kind of probably why they have the 65 cutoff, because it's
Obviously, that was a joke.
what?
Obviously, I was joking about that.
Yeah, you're a fucking old man, I know.
Yeah, that was the point.
But but then like later on when people are older, they have assistance programs for people that can't afford healthcare, specifically through government programs. So like having like it's interesting having a obligatory like Canada is an obligatory public system versus the States has a private system but also has public options within it, which is kind of gets back to our whole capitalism versus socialism debate, which is like capitalism like socialism requires total buy-in, i.e. the public health option in Canada, versus capitalism allows socialist enterprise within a capitalist overarching system. I think it's actually a good example of that.
I think, okay, yeah, that's a fair example for what I was asking earlier, but I think that could still work both ways. Like,
I don't though, because I don't think so. So in the States, the big problem is if you have a public option where the government requires prices, like so they have a private doctors and stuff, right? And the private doctors charge whatever the fuck they want to the regular people with the private insurance. The government mandates that the public people that they take are taken at a set price, so they actually make less money off of the people they take from the government. So it basically it really fucks them, and I kind of lost my point, being alcohol
okay,
and stuff, but like it really messes with the system, and I don't think it works for an equitable system in which you're forced to either you have to force compliance, or either you have to say you have to take these public people, or they just say no, I don't want to take the people from the government because I'm making less per patient, I could just make more money.
yeah, okay, so two things. First, yeah, that individual doctor isn't going to want to do that because they'll make less money, but that's what I was saying, sort of like similar to the individual focus versus the bigger picture. Like, yeah, they're not going to want to have those situations, and they'll make less in those situations. But if they think about it individually, they'll be angry. If they think about it where they're benefiting more people that way, and they're already making money, and a lot of money overall, to just like bite the bullet sometimes, then it won't be as much of an issue. But so either way, about like regardless of that, I don't think
Well, you're assuming that the people that are taking the public option is a small percentage. What it happens when it becomes a 50% percentage, and all of a
50-50.
sudden, go ahead.
Like, unless it's 90-10 or like way more of the situations where the doctor is not making as much, even still, I think they can just suck it up. They're going to be rich regardless. But if it's 80-20 or 90-10, then fine. That's a more concerning issue. But if it's 50-50, if it's even 60 public, 40 otherwise, I don't think that's something to complain about. You're just being greedy after that.
So you're arguing for more moral people.
I'm arguing for people to be less individually focused.
Okay, interesting. So like that's one thing that I've had personal experience with. So like, my mom obviously, and
Some,
for people that don't know, my mom is a lawyer, family lawyer, and she represents she represents like adults in divorces as well as children in abuse cases, et cetera, mortgages, yada yada yada. The cases she takes. So I'm gonna give you a quick comparison. So there's cases. All the children she gets is funded through the government, right? Because kids obviously don't have their own money to pay their own lawyer. So she gets all the children's law society cases through the government, and then she has her own private clients that pay them individually. What do you think the difference in payment between what the government pays her for a child versus what she gets from representing an adult is? Like as a percentage or a factorial?
obviously higher from the second, I assume.
Yeah, she makes about 4 times the amount of money from the adults that are privately paying versus what the government pays her to represent a child.
Okay, and I don't necessarily like. Okay, that system though isn't the issue. It's the difference in how it's set up right now. But if it's the same system where it's only slightly higher or slightly lower for the public, then it's not an issue. The issue is how it's distributed within that system right now. That doesn't mean the system's bad.
So my mom, being that she's a great and wonderful lady, takes on lots of children for less money because she enjoys what she
Right?
does,
She's
and
not individually focused.
she is individually focused, but
Is, but you know what I mean.
less so. She's also cares a lot about other people and stuff. I don't know. Like I feel like like I think it's an issue both with the system and like you say, oh, it's not a problem with an issue, it's how it's set up and stuff, and it's like, yes, but if that's the only way the system can function,
It's
then
not.
obviously okay, well, the government just can't come up with 4 times the amount of money to pay the fucking lawyers to represent kids in divorce cases.
Of course, but it could be more equal. That difference between the two is not ideal, but it can be closer.
It can be closer, but once again, the government doesn't make money itself. It takes money from other people in order to redistribute it. So where does the government get that money from? It's got to either cut programs in another area in order to come up with that money, or they have to raise taxes.
Okay, well, we're going to get off track now, but my answer to that would be if you went further into the socialist spectrum, there would be government means of production that would produce that income.
Yeah,
And when it's capitalist, the money is made by the private citizens. So the only way to get that money into systems is to tax those private citizens. If it's further socialist, the government has more ways to get money.
yeah, but the government ends up naturally spending more money to get more money. I don't think they end up with more money because they end up with more bureaucrats overseeing it, and they end up with the exact same amount of money because they're not obligated to show, oh, we made all this much more money now all of a sudden. They just go, oh yeah, we're keeping it the exact same, and then they keep the money for themselves and pay off all the bureaucrats that manage everything.
Yeah, I don't disagree that I don't like the government's not trustworthy, but neither is so and so who runs their own business and is the richest person in the world and doesn't like. Both sides have higher up controlling factors that aren't trustworthy.
Your whole yeah, but your whole thing, like my thing is capitalism is a functional economic system within reality. Your whole thing is, well, if people were just better, then socialism would work, and it's like, yeah, great, it would, but people aren't better. People are people. We're all flawed.
I'm not saying completely that. I don't think, like, yes, that is true, but that's not my point. I don't think that people will ever be good enough that it would just work without a flaw. I don't think communism has worked because of partly that point. But I don't think, like, yeah, capitalism so far functions, but the like the income distribution and the point from the lowest to the highest in the States, Canada too, but not so obviously. Like, yeah, it's functioning, but nothing about that is good. Like,
So you take it from a jealousy perspective of, even though I'm doing better at the bottom end, I'm doing better now. Even though I'm doing better now than I was 100 years ago, he's doing even more better now. So fuck him.
That's not what I'm saying at all. But if anything, capitalism and the free market influences the jealousy aspect.
So I like to
people want to be richer.
So I'd like to read you a thing, because yours is you're talking about like income disparity right now, right?
All I'm trying to say is the way capitalism has the economy set up in the States specifically is not amazing. Like, yes, it works, but it's not amazing at all. That was my point.
I think it's relatively good. Could it be better? Obviously, there's always room for improvement on anything.
A lot better, though. There's nothing barely above good. Like, not even at good. It's like 51%.
All right, so we're gonna go through some things. So, from the 1800s to present day United States, per head, the average wage, or the average household income has increased 3,000% and has disproportionately benefited the lowest earners. In the mid 20th century, at the beginning of the 20th century, so early 1900s, 95% of the entire world population was in abject poverty. Capitalism comes in and takes over a bunch of these countries. The world abject poverty rating nowadays is below 10%.
I'd say capitalism started before that.
Yeah, Adam Smith started it around, what, 1850 to 1870 area?
But yeah.
Where's my China stuff? Because China's an interesting one. Because China takes on capitalism. So here's China. China, 1981, stood at 88.3% of their population was extremely poor. By 2015, only 0.7% of the Chinese population was living in extreme poverty. In this period, the number of poor people in China fell from 878 million to less than 10 million. That's from 1981 into 2015. So 1960s was when, 1950 to early 1960s was Mao's Great Cultural Revolution, right? Which was all the socialist indoctrination, communist, whatever you want to call it, was when they went into a fully socialized system. Out of that, they start to adopt more and more capitalist things. They open to international trade. In the late 1960s, they adopt relatively capitalist model, although there's a lot of state intervention and them taking a lot of the piece of the pie. But it falls from 1981 at 8.3% to 0.7% of the Chinese population living in extreme poverty. 878 million people to less than 10 million people living in extreme poverty due to, was it capitalism affecting the low end, helping the fucking abjectly impoverished? I understand that socialism would work well in an ideological world, in an ideal world, but so would capitalism work well if there was no greedy people. Like, you once again, we're going back to what I talked about earlier, which was you're comparing socialism, if everybody was great, to capitalism in the real world. And it's like, why don't we compare capitalism in the real world to socialism in the real world, or capitalism as in an ideal society to socialism in an ideal society?
I still think ideally socialism would be better. Capitalism would be better too, but irrelevant.
Why? Okay. Are you arguing socialism would be better in an ideal world if everybody was morally just?
Sure, but the second part doesn't need to be involved. Like, the difference between being individually focused and dictating all your choices, all your economic choices based on individual motives compared to at least considering the collective somewhat that's not necessarily moral. Like,
People do consider others. So have you ever heard of
but not more than themselves most of the time in these decisions.
no,
Obviously, everybody cares about themselves more than other people in some sense, other than the odd outlier. But in those specific decisions, economic decisions, putting yourself and your welfare above everybody else and not being willing to accept certain things based on how it affects you compared to how it affects other people, that is what I'm getting at. Not an overall.
that's not capitalism. That's the human condition, dude.
No, but
Okay,
okay.
well, have you done any research into so do you know who Adam Smith is?
I know who Adam Smith is. Yes.
Yes. Have you looked at all into Adam Smith's the invisible hand concept?
Yeah, I read that book in like second year, so I remember generally, but sure.
All right, so it's the idea that in order to help oneself, you have to help others. So the unintended like greater social benefit brought by individually helping yourself, right?
But
Because you're
that's
gonna.
theoretical. Nothing
It's not
about that.
theoretical. It takes place in capitalism. Like, what are you talking about?
Not really. Like, yes, you can see instances of that, but it's still the winners win and the losers may be benefited in some certain senses and certain ways you flip it and look at it, but it's still mainly for the winners.
It's not mainly for the winners. It's mainly for the individual. Like you're talking about all these like megacorps and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just saying the small business owner even like I'm going to make my prices lower, which is going to help you, but is also going to help me because I'm going to have more people buy my service.
Okay.
That's literally invisible hand concept at work, right? Like I'm helping you by providing you the exact same service at a lower price. You're helping me by purchasing the service, and by lowering the price, I'm having more people purchase my service.
That's one aspect of it, but the individual
Okay.
hand.
The other aspect of it is by providing a better service, more people will purchase the same thing. So, but by providing a better service, more people will purchase it. Therefore, I'm having more income. By providing a better service, people are also receiving a better service. Those are basically
Yeah.
the two
And,
dimensions of it: is price and quality. And
okay,
like
but that's
both of
my
them
point.
both of
Yes,
them interact positively with both ends of the spectrum.
that is good and correct, and but the theory of that, what you wrote down, isn't what it grows into. Like, that's not how it stays. Just because that part is good, it grows into a not ideal capitalist monster where it's ballooned into only the winners winning.
No, it hasn't. There's plenty of people that come from the bottom up. There's plenty of people that come from impoverished households, start businesses, and end up millionaires.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Once they become the 1%, it's not, that doesn't apply. That, what you were just saying doesn't apply anymore.
Why not? They
Because
don't.
then
Once they become millionaires, they no longer have business sense and no longer try to do the best for their business by helping other people.
it gets to a point and a cutoff. I don't know where, and this is hypothetical, but there's a cutoff point where you growing your business is benefited by caring about your customers. And then after that point, it's benefited by just you're making money originally from caring about your customers. And afterwards, once they're hooked on the line, you don't have to care. They're still going to purchase your product.
I think you're the one living in the hypothetical world now, Tim. I
Yeah,
don't think
that
you have a lot to. I don't think you have a lot to back that. Like,
why like
a lot of the biggest or the most philanthropic individuals are some of the richest people in the world.
yeah, like Bill Gates, sure.
Like Bill
But
Gates, like a lot of the sports stars, like a lot of those dudes give away they
okay,
make $10 million a year playing sports, and they
hold on,
give away half of
hold
that
on,
to
hold on, hold on.
fucking like food programs and shit in
Celebrities
their
and
local
sports and
communities.
athletes, those aren't business owners. They don't really have anything to do with the capitalist model. They don't
Sure they
deserve.
do. They're
Yeah,
providing no. They're providing a service to the team, and the team is paying for them for that
a
service.
highly inflated price that really, if we're going to get into it, no athlete or celebrity deserves the amount of money they're getting. So yeah, good on them for doing the obviously good thing and giving back in some sense. That's
Yeah, but
a
you're saying
thing.
everybody's a greedy jackass and going to hold on to all their money because of
And
that.
there's
It's
a
like
fair amount
clearly
of
not true.
sure, but it's not the same thing. Like they're not like yeah, they get into it to make money, sure, but most athletes love playing the sport and yeah, they're going to make an income out of it, but they're not starting a business with the function and mentality of growing it and making more money. And like yeah, some of the business minded like LeBron James or whatever, like yeah, they're focused in that sense, but that's a different aspect. With Bill Gates, yes, I agree now that he's at a plateau where he's one of the richest people in the world. He's actively and visibly socially giving back. But when he was growing, he was very detrimental to competing businesses and people buying his products. He wanted to make sure Microsoft controlled everything and nothing was fucking with him until he got to a point where now he's like, all right, I'm safe, I'm fine. I'll start being philanthropic.
I think that he contributed along the way.
Not like okay, I don't know this for like it's not factual. I'm not basing it on anything, but I would be willing to bet that if you mapped out his time frame of like his growth, the amount that he's given to charities there'll be a point relatively recently when you can notice a lot of it and bigger amounts. And if you go back through, there might be some points when he's given, but way lesser and way more sparse. I could be completely wrong, but I'd be willing to bet a lot of money. Because he's not.
You want a year by year breakdown, but like it's like he obviously gave more money as he made more money.
Yeah, but he was already rich. It's just okay. It's not the fact that he wasn't. I'm not saying he wasn't giving anything at that point. Just he was more concerned with making sure nothing was going against his profits. He was probably still rich enough that he would give away money to charity and whatnot, but that wasn't his. Like he was still more concerned with making sure he stayed where he was. Now that he's at a point where nothing's really going to hinder his situation, he can give away more and make that more public. And I'm not saying he wasn't concerned with others before. It's just
we're gonna look at it. Well, this article is talking about since 1994.
I would think the range from the 80s to 2000-ish, there's much less philanthropic activity than the past 10 years.
I think you're talking out of your ass, Tim, but all right.
Have we not been doing that this entire time?
More or less, yeah.
Okay, just before you prove me wrong if you're going to, the fact that I can think of, maybe I just haven't paid attention, but 3 or 4 or 5, I know, examples though, that I don't know the exact things he donated to, but remember seeing him in the news doing this amount of money towards this within the past 5-10 years and have a vivid image of that, whereas never remembering it before. What?
In 1994, the Bill Gates Foundation was started. Mid-2000s, the foundation funding grew substantially to $2 billion a year. On June 15, 2006, Gates announced his plans to transition out of his day-to-day role at Microsoft effective July 31st, 2008 to allow him to devote more time to working with the foundation. The first CEO of the foundation stepped down as of 2008. In 2005, Bill and Melinda Gates, along with the Irish rock musician Bono, were named the Time. Who gives a fuck about that? That's 2013. Warren Buffett gave a bunch of money in 2006.
Pause your explanation. Jesus. I'll be right back.
$62 billion Warren Buffett gave. That's how much.
Pause. Go to the bathroom.
Pause. All right. We're going to read through this. Yeah, like the Bill Gates Foundation's funded in 1994. Like, Gates Cambridge Scholarship, financial assistance. Yeah, I don't know about that. Beer number 5. We're at beer number 6. Yeah, their foundation's donated to a bunch of natural disasters. We're gonna go with the. Oh, that. That's all. Hello. One sec. This one. Plug again, bud. Try again one more time. One more time, fan. There we go. Hang on. Base Foundation was founded in 1904, and I think you have this like idea that before they start indulging in philanthropy, but I don't think that's necessarily true, especially like if you look at for example, one of the I don't want to call them inventors. What are they? One of the guys who started Costco. He's like he never even made it to $1 billion. For like versus like you got guys like guy who owns Walmart and he's like $100 billion. It's like I think it depends individual to individual. But regardless, I want to get off the philanthropy thing and talk about some other stuff.
Okay, all I want to say in response to that is I don't think it's a night and day thing that he didn't donate at all prior. Just it's on average, if you looked at a big range of people like that and situations like that, it would lean more towards what I'm saying. I don't think there isn't examples of otherwise. I don't think there isn't examples of Bill Gates specifically and his foundation donating prior to him being comfortable or more comfortable. It would just be more leaning towards that, not specifically cut and dry those two differences.
Yeah. I don't think you're wrong. Well, I don't know. I think you have a little bit of a caricature of I think you have a bit of a caricature of like an evil capitalist inside your head, and like I think you gotta understand as well that like 90% of small business is like less than 50 employees. Not, like 90% of overall business, sorry, is like small business, less than 50 employees, and like there aren't so many mega corporations with these uber rich. And like, yeah, it'd be great if these uber rich people, like paid a bunch of money and helped out the lower people, but like the overall taxes are taken not from them but from like the what would we call it, the petit bourgeoisie, who are like the quarter
Middle class,
quarter
rich
of a
middle
million,
class.
like the $250,000 to $1 million dudes who are like earning a good living, but aren't excessively wealthy, and they're much more worried about reinvesting in their own business.
They're still thinking about their money.
Well, no shit. A lot of them are floating on like bank loans in order to buy
All
for their next thing.
excessively wealthy. They don't have to think about that on the day to day. Those people, the range you're talking about, yeah, they're rich, like from relative to us, but finances are still a relevant aspect of their day to day.
Like I don't know if you understand necessarily like how much debt a lot of these people take on. Like my boss is in a lot of debt. Like our business cleared well over $1 million last year. My boss is like in probably like $75,000 of debt personally just to keep the business afloat.
Yeah, they live in a constant situation of balancing and balancing. Yeah, you're not, just because they take in a certain amount doesn't mean, like if you just look at that stat, then sure, you're rich, but there's so many more aspects. So like I do get that. I'm not I'm using the uber rich as a hyperbolic example to prove my point. I don't think the people in the States that, like the majority of the people that have had issues with raising taxes and recent democratic or leaning political movements, are the uber rich that don't want to pay more taxes, even though, yeah, they're paying more money, but they have more to give. Yeah, the people that are in the bracket you're talking about would rather not, but they aren't the ones spearheading being opposed to those movements.
Yeah, but these people are the 1%. Like once you're over about 200 grand in Canada, you're top
I totally
1%.
disagree with that. Like I don't know the exact range, but when I say 1%, I'm talking about the world's richest people. The range
Well,
you're talking about to me,
Tim. You personally are in the top 1% of the total world.
okay. Well, I was saying country to country, but
Like,
yeah, fine.
I think you have a bit of
Middle
a
class
maybe you have a bit
anywhere,
of a. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
middle class anywhere in the Western world is miles ahead of the majority of the world. I understand that, but on top of that 1%, then I'm just talking about United States and Canada more or less. The 1% of that 1% is what I'm talking about. Upper middle class is wealthy, yes, but that's not the people that I have a conceptual issue with.
So are you talking about like the 0.1%? Like you're talking, I think you're talking about like the 0.01% of the Western world, like 0.01, because like
Maybe of the whole world.
the 1% cutoff. I don't know in Canada what it is, but I know the 1% cutoff in the states is anybody who nets more than like 260 grand.
I don't know that that's wrong, but I just feel that that's wrong. If it is right, then the terms I'm using aren't representing what I'm talking about then.
Like
You remember the
you think
Occupy
people
Street
are? I think
movement?
you think people are generally richer than they are. I mean, we're doing all right,
No,
but like,
a very small amount, but the amount that this percent is richer than the rest is so much of a difference that it doesn't matter how small that percentage is. There's still the amount of money in that 1% is still way, way more than everybody else.
yes, there's a minute fraction that makes a ridiculously uber amount of money. I would agree. I would agree to that 100%. There is a very minute fraction, but like as you go up the income kind of like distribution hierarchy, it becomes exponentially smaller as you move from 100,000 to 500,000 to a million to 2 million to 10 million. Like it becomes exponentially smaller the number of people that make this amount of money because it's that much harder. Like the amount of
So
people
you're
that
saying there's less rich people than there is poor people.
what?
You're saying there's less rich people than there is poor people.
Yeah, there's obviously, but
Yeah.
we're not
What
talking about
else?
that. We're talking about like what is the actual percentage of people that are you're talking about because you're talking about these people that are like uber wealthy that I think you're probably talking about people that make like $10 million plus a year, and I would say those people are probably less than 0.001%, maybe
Sure.
0.003% of the
I don't
total
know the exact number.
population.
My point of that, though, is whatever little percentage of that, there's still more money in that percentage between those small amount of people than the larger percentage of people. Like, regardless of what exact percentage you want to say it is, what I meant by the 1% doesn't have to, like the amount of people in there to the other side doesn't have to matter. It's the amount of money that smaller percentage
Okay,
has compared to the rest.
do you think those people earn that money?
That's debatable, but not entirely relevant. There's
No, I
there's
think it is.
people that
It matters if you believe in a meritocratic society. If you believe in a meritocratic society in which people get what they've earned, then yeah, guess what? The dude who invented whatever you want to call it, some sort of new technology, guess what? I want him to be paid an exponential amount of money to go invent the next great thing because guess what? It's going to
sure,
benefit all of us fucking
sure,
peons. Like
sure.
the dude who invented maybe Discord, for example, should be paid, $50 million for inventing Discord because he affected so many people's lives and made it so much easier by writing a ridiculously beneficial code for everybody. Yes, I want people to be rewarded because it incentivizes great behavior.
Can I? Okay, I got two things to say, and I want to get through the whole one and I'm going to paint a picture. But the first part is, do you think they're like so? Guy who invented Discord, sure, he should be rewarded for doing that. That's beneficial to a wide audience. but should he be rewarded for the rest of his life, just no questions asked? Or should it be, you should keep being rewarded because of the potential of you further adding things to society, and if you don't end up doing that, you'll stop being rewarded? Or that person should just forever be in a state of financial comfort?
I mean, he
Like,
should be rewarded accordingly for the what he added to society.
right.
So
But what if you just
whether
do
he's
that and
rewarded in a monetary sense, like yeah, he should be rewarded for what he added to society, and then beyond that, we're talking about software patches, which Discord's had plenty. He's continually improving Discord and making it a better platform for us all to use, and continues to be rewarded by the stock price continuing to go up.
good, yes, but if that wasn't happening, should he continue to be rewarded based on the potential of that happening?
Well, no, but people aren't. People aren't rewarded based off of potential action. People are rewarded for action.
Is making that guy the same amount of money but not growing, not adding to future benefits, just continuing the same, like, Discord exists but nothing is furthering? The money's still gonna, like, he's still gonna get the same amount based on the possibility, right?
No, because okay, well, so in the capitalist society, there is innovation. So Discord's invented. It's great.
Only if a
Lots of
problem
people.
occurs.
What?
Only if a problem occurs. If the production
No.
is still fine, used, and doesn't need to be advanced, then
No.
there doesn't have to be any.
Yeah, but our society is in constant growth.
I
You're
know that's
neglecting
why
that point. So you're
I
neglecting the
know
point.
that.
You're neglecting the point that our society is in constant growth. So like he invents Discord. Discord's great. Lots of people buy it. Stock goes up. He makes millions of dollars, right? Should he be continued
Yep.
to be rewarded? Okay, if he continues to put out software patches that improves the software, then yes, he should be rewarded as such. If he doesn't, then the software stays as such. Next person comes along, invents better software, people start to buy that, stock price goes down, he no longer is worth as much money because his money is
Okay.
tied
Yeah.
up in shares in his company. Therefore,
Right.
he is rewarded less based off of him stagnating. Yes, that's just
Not
how
doing.
capitalism
Yeah.
works.
Okay, I know. I agree with that, and I understand that's how it actually works. I was trying to use the hypothetical to say that if there was a situation where there's a business or a product that can be stagnant and still useful, and no competing interest is improving upon it, but it's not adding more, why should that person still be benefiting? But that wasn't my first point.
As long as the
It
product
wasn't my
is
main.
as long as the product is still benefiting society in some way, then that person should be rewarded for benefiting society. When innovation comes along in order to push that product out, they either need to innovate themselves or they lose
After.
capital. That's just how it
Yeah.
works.
Okay. I know that's how it actually works. I agree with your point there. That was my lesser point. My bigger question. So I want to paint an idea here, and you tell me what you said is like, if you're contributing something, you should be getting rewarded accordingly. Yes?
Yeah.
Say yes or no. Don't. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
if you contribute
That's
to
what you
society, you should be rewarded based on your contribution to society. Sure.
Yes,
Yeah.
accordingly, like, correspond to the amount you put in, or how much that's worth to the society. Okay, so I still work at this restaurant, but the owner, not our owners now, but our old owners, the dad that actually owned the business I met him twice in 3 years, and his son was our owner, manager, whatever. He didn't do anything ever. He was hardly ever there. We never really saw him. He'd come in and in the middle of a Friday night dinner rush, order food and expect that to be out at a reasonable time while trying to feed customers, and then he'd dip and be gone. And yes, not necessarily him, but his dad created or bought this business, like, made the company, allows us to have jobs, but then in practical senses does nothing to keep it going, like is never around. All he contributes is the frame, but he makes people in that position, managers, like higher up managers, owners, financial partners, get way more out of situations like that while putting next to nothing in. Like, he didn't build that building. He bought it off somebody in the past and made it into the restaurant that it was while he was there. And then essentially just looked at finances and basically delegated that to his two sons, but still brings more out of that for himself than anybody else involved who does way more work. So that type of person, that type of corporate-minded individual, that is a small percentage of American and Canadian society, but that is the type of 1%er that I'm talking about. And those people, those attitudes, have way more money putting in way less.
I think you're okay. While it is shitty, and I'm not gonna disagree, like, okay, capital investment and then leaving it is not a great way to do it. You're neglecting risk reward entirely. He's investing capital that he has accrued from doing something else.
Sure, but he should still keep his eye on that.
He should. We're not saying shoulds. We're saying like yeah, he should.
Most people in the situations are like this guy, though.
No. Like, I've worked for multiple small businesses. You've worked for lots of small businesses. Like my boss works 12-hour days.
Mark is exactly like you.
Mark was not exactly like this. Mark literally worked behind us. Literally the entire. Okay, so Tim and I worked for a pool company when we were in university together, and he's saying Mark is exactly like this, and yet Mark is not exactly like this because we went and did all the labor and opened them. Mark did the technical stuff with all of the pumps. Do you know how to get a pump going out of winter into the spring, like to get a heater going? Do you know how to do any of that shit? No, he's got technical ability. He's built up over years.
Yes, okay, Mark is not exactly the same. He was hands-on, he was there, he was present, but his mentality was the same. He's just at a lower point. If that business ever becomes like the manager of my restaurant, the owner, has more years and growth behind him that he can be the way he's being now. Mark and that company is younger, and he still needs to be present in order to make sure it functions the way he wants it to. Give it 10 years and enough growth and enough positivity, he will slowly remove himself and become more what I'm talking about. His mentality is the same, but he's a better person.
You don't think Mark deserves any kind of reward for taking the risk? You don't think Mark deserves any kind of reward for taking the initial risk and investing a large amount of capital that could have bankrupted him into the business, and then spending 2 decades working? You're seeing the work he does there. You don't see all the work the small business owner does behind the scenes. Like, I know Shane is up until 2 a.m. most nights doing quotes, doing his paperwork, making sure his taxes are filed, doing his commercial licensing and stuff like that. Like, you don't think he deserves any kind of reward for putting in 12-hour days for 2 decades?
That's not what I'm saying.
At a technical
level. The opposite of what I said isn't that those people don't deserve any reward. It's that they're getting too much in the average situation than what it should be closer. Like, obviously, initially, the business owner is taking huge risks, and they deserve to get paid back for those risks. But there comes a point in the average situation where they stop deserving. They maintain a way bigger reward the whole time without any change, whereas right away, yeah, they're putting in enough to get back that level of reward, but that slowly decreases, and they get more and more as their input gets less and less.
Do you have any idea what the percentage of like small business failure is?
Yeah, but that's not even
It's
I'm
like
talking
over 50.
about
It's over 50%. Over 50% is I
I'm talking
invest.
about
I invest
$200.
$100,000 into my business and I get $0 back out of that. It's no. He
Yeah,
deserves
but
money
those
because of the
aren't
risk he
involved.
took.
If they fail, then it doesn't ever get to the point of what I'm talking about.
Yes,
I
but
understand that.
the fact that he was willing to take the risk, like you're putting nothing on the risk. You're just saying he put in some work and he deserves proportionate reward for the work he does. And it's like he
The way
deserves proportionate reward for the work he does in addition to the risk he took.
I'm not saying owners and startups shouldn't get more than the rest, but the change in, like, as the business grows and is positively increasing, the business owner gets way more and increases way more while simultaneously doing less. That shouldn't be the way it works. It should be a closer exchange.
I
Yes,
don't
right
think
away.
it's I don't think it's simultaneously doing less per one. It's a shifting of roles to being a more behind the scenes. They do a lot more paperwork and less
That
physical
would be
work.
what they would
And
make.
also, you're taking away the incentive structure. The whole incentive structure for starting a small business is that you spend 20 years grinding 12-hour days, 7 days a week for 2 decades in order so that when you're 45 and you spent 2 decades working your fucking ass off, that all of a sudden you can make as much as the guy who went in to, say, like my dad went to work for Rogers and started making 100 grand when he was 28 because he had a fucking MBA. Like yeah, you can take the safe method and go work for a large megacorp, or you can go start a small business and make that 20 years down the line. If you make it past the over 50% failure rate and stuff, then yes, you would get a disproportionate reward. That's the incentive structure for taking the massive risk. You've got over 50% of failure. If you went out tomorrow and they said, well, you've got about a 57% chance of dying in this car crash tomorrow on your drive to work, would you go to work?
Probably.
Fuck you, Tim. Um,
That
I
would give
probably would
me,
too.
but I don't disagree with that, and I am much more in favor of the small business startup like that compared to just joining a corporation. But
I
in
just
one
don't.
sense, Roger, big corporations like that, like getting to that point is what I'm talking about. The owners of corporations at that level is what I'm talking about. Not Mark necessarily, that's a bad example, or the owner of my restaurant, but small businesses are where every business starts and it grows to a point where those changes happen.
But I just okay. We might just disagree on the incentive structure because I think that's part of the incentive structure is the not point or like the 0.0001% chance that your business turns into a large megacorp is part of the incentive structure of putting in the toil and effort that might result in you having to declare bankruptcy.
I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying, but I feel like you're missing the
Maybe
point
I
I'm
maybe
trying to
I
get
am.
across.
Maybe I am. Try. Okay. Like I just
Like,
I feel like I understand that you're saying like okay when they reach such a point that they should not take such high salaries and certain people don't, but at the same
sure.
time I feel like being able to take such a lucrative salary is part of the incentive structure to take the risk initially is what I'm saying, and I feel like
I'm
you're
not at
also
all
missing
saying
that.
they should not. Obviously, the owner, the person who built the company, like, more often than not, most of the time, it makes perfect sense that unless they're a super altruistic person, they should be making the most money out of anybody at the company, for sure. And even the least involved business owner still does things, sure. I'm not disagreeing with any of that. It's the ratio and the average of corporate minded business people in those situations, the higher up and the more massive corporation model, like,
All right.
I'm talking about averages and
I'm gonna go take a piss. We're gonna move on to a new subject because I feel like this is just This
we're gonna
is
get stuck
a
on
bit of
this.
an. I feel like it's a bit of an irreconcilable point where we just disagree and maybe we're talking past each other. Maybe it would work better if we're in person and like could maybe explain it a little better or whatever. But I feel like this is a bit of a
If there's ever
point.
comments on this, I feel like that would be the top one.
Yeah, I'm gonna go take a piss. I've got a question for you coming back, or you can ask a question of me. We'll figure that out. Entertain the
So,
people. Door closed. This is fun. I'm having a good time. I hope anybody watching this at a later time or currently is also enjoying. In case anybody's wondering, the goal was to do this the first weekend of every month, probably on the Saturday. Tim blew it off last weekend, so our goal is to once a month
Yep.
do a cast on some subject or another, have a month to basically prep information and stuff. We both have a decent background of general knowledge, but to have a month to prep for an idea and have a discussion once a month. Tim's thought about doing it more often, but responsibilities and things, so we'll see how that goes. He also blew off last month, so we'll see. And Tim's also got to watch his drinking and stuff, so things and such. How many beers are you at, Tim?
0.
0 beers left or drank?
I haven't had a beer tonight.
Do you want to chug a beer with me?
I don't have enough left to do that. Oh, you got me there. Damn.
Alright, well, I'm going to chug a beer because why not? You can contemplate. Do you want to ask a question, or I've got a couple left that we haven't touched on at all?
Let me look through, but I think you should probably go.
I was
We
maybe
kinda
a little
touched
bit
on
more
that.
prepared just because, like, Tim had a lot going on with school, so his thing. So I'll give him a second to think about this while I chug this beer. There's a couple different domains that I wouldn't mind taking this into. We already touched a little bit on. So question 2, communism and socialism, what's the difference? That one, yada, yada, yada. We talked about how state formation happens, revolutionary acts. That one would be interesting. But this one I actually had as my first question, but we never touched on it. All right, so it's a bit of a reader, so you're gonna have to listen, okay, bud?
Hold on.
I'm gonna put in my second headphone so I can hear you again fully and hopefully understand.
Can you hear me? Chair?
Oh, headphones, really?
Chair?
Ugh.
Can you hear me, Jeremy?
Give it a sec. Oh, give it a sec. Give it a minute or two. Connected. Yada yada yada. Yeah, I really should have charged my AirPods beforehand, shouldn't I? That's good stuff. There we go. Back to normal. Now we're just waiting on Tim. How long have we been live for, anyways? Oh, delicious. Mucho delicioso. Apparently, we've had one person watching us this entire time. On Twitch, though. Not on the YouTubes. Hello, person. You back, bud?
Can you hear me yet?
I just needed.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I should have charged my AirPods fully before this, but Camille almost took them to work. You want to know something interesting, bud? We've had
Always.
We've had a single viewer for the last hour and 15 minutes. Might be Camille at work.
Actually?
Yeah, there's been one person on Twitch for the last hour or something.
Either way, that's a joke.
It might be Camille, but regardless, kind of funny. Love it.
Yeah, even if it is, it's still awesome.
If this is just for us, it's just for us, and if not, whatever. I like the fact that I can be far away from this mic and talk. All right, so I almost finished the beer. You can't see it, but it's 2/3 done. I'm gonna finish it. While I finish it, you can ponder the question. So this was my first question. This is probably the most developed question I had, and it's one that I'm interested in your response to. So,
Hold on. Before you start, how long do you think the discussion on this question will take?
I don't know.
Hello?
Simply put, I don't fucking know.
Okay, what I was going to say, I have two kind of minor points. Should I get them out before and deal with that before your question?
Sure.
Feel like
I've got a couple major questions still left. That could definitely be a good half hour or something discussion. The top one, I don't know whether it'd be a long take, but it'd be an interesting one for sure. So you could get the minor things out of the way. Sure, go for it.
No, you go on.
All right, so I'm gonna read for a minute, and you're gonna listen, and that's gonna be that. Ponder it, think about it. Okay, so socialism emerged in response to the Industrial Revolution. It was first theorized in order to protect workers, who many felt were being exploited by industrial owners. Unions perform a similar role in protecting workers in modern society. Did unions solve the problem of worker exploitation? Is there a place for unions in a socialist society, being they perform a similar role to what the government would be doing?
Okay, repeat the actual questions there.
There's a couple different questions. So, did unions solve? Did unions solve?
Socialism comes from the industrial.
Yeah, socialism comes from the Industrial Revolution. It was theorized in order to protect workers who many felt were being exploited by the Industrial Revolution. Unions perform a similar role in protecting workers. First question, did unions solve the problem of worker exploitation? We're talking mostly in Western countries, because obviously they're still West, right? And then, is there a place for unions in a socialist society, being that they perform a similar role to what the government would be doing in protecting workers? The thinker. Eh? I actually have a couple good questions that I thought through and that I thought
Yeah,
might.
no, that is a good question. There's a lot to that. I like that. So, okay. First, I think socialism as such, as an actual concrete economic, political, social movement, came in response to the Industrial Revolution. But the socialist mentality and theoretical mindset existed and has been attempted to be implemented way before, but that's not necessarily relevant. Um, it coming as a form of protection, unions as that concept to protect workers. I don't think that solved worker exploitation. It's just one of the most obvious, easily applied, easily thought of methods of trying to solve that problem, but obviously it didn't solve it. Like worker exploitation, it's still rampant. Unions are exploitive to workers in some senses when like the concept of a union is obviously good for workers, but it can easily grow into being detrimental for workers too. Is it possible within socialism? I mean, that's a complicated question. Like once a fully 100%, as you say, is necessary socialist system is implemented, like yeah, I don't know. That's a hard thing to imagine. Like,
I know. Well,
would
that was one of the ones I like. I did a little bit of listening. Like a lot of my research is more from listening to different podcasts about different things, especially when it comes to
and reading
economics.
Jordan Peterson books?
Yes, and reading Jordan Peterson. So one of the things I listened to was like a 10-part series from Milton Friedman, and it was called
Milton
Free.
Friedman.
Yeah, it's called Free to Choose, and it's like a 1984 series, and the entire thing was posted on YouTube. So I listened to the entire 10-part series, and one of the entire episodes was about unions, and it really got me thinking like about how unions perform a similar function to the collectivization in terms of protecting the worker from being exploited by a quote unquote capitalist, and
It's just
therefore
a smaller scale version.
yeah, so therefore is there like if a society becomes socialist, is there actually a place for unions within that society, or are they obsolete? And it's an interesting idea to kind of delve into and think about.
It's just like my first thought is if that's how the system was working, would the concept of a union ever even be thought of as a necessary response for the workers because they're already in a system where it already works as more or less a larger scale union. But if it got bad, they're kind of barred from the ability to respond by creating a union. So that's worse. So yeah, I don't know. Like that's
So
complicated.
we'll come from like a modern standpoint of not we're already in a socialist society. Can we form unions in that? Of we have unions in this society. We become socialist. Is there
But
still
you
a
don't
place?
think we are in a socialist society.
No, we're not right now. But so, okay, so we're saying like we're in today's
Hypothetically.
society. There's unions like the teachers' union, like the Ontario College of Trades and stuff. There's trade unions. There's
Yeah.
teachers' unions. There's like health official unions. We're in today's society. Today's society, we elect some socialist party. We go towards a socialist route, become a socialist society. Is there still a place within that society for the already existing unions? Or are they now obsolete and like there's no reason to pay your union dues anymore because they no longer protect you against exploitative
Yeah.
measures?
I feel like for the majority of that, the possible ways that could play out, the unions wouldn't be necessary anymore because they are, in essence, a response. And what they respond to would no longer be affecting them. So they'd be obsolete in the sense that they would be engulfed into the greater system.
So you think there is no way in which the government would exploit the individual?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I think the government is very likely to exploit the individual, and they do all the time. I'm
Right.
not
Well,
pro-government.
no, I know, but so we become a socialist society. The government's now owns means of production, right, or something along those lines. Um, does the union still need to exist to protect the individual now, not from the capitalist owner, but from the government exploiting the individual? Is kind of where I'm going with it, right?
Yeah, I know. That's a hard thing to answer because the worker in me wants to say yes. The worker still needs that defense collective, but at the same time, that change that you're saying is basically making it into a system where that collective is the overseeing power. So in concept, that union is absorbed into that power, so it doesn't need to be there anymore. But then also, I don't trust myself, and I think most people would agree that the government's not going to do everything the way you want it to do. So,
So you still
but then at the
need
same time,
you still need a collective representative to bring your concerns to the government.
yes, for sure.
So there is
So it
still
makes
a
it hard.
place for the union
But at the same
within.
time, what I was just getting to is even right now how things are. Yeah, the union is a defense mechanism against private corporate owner management power, but just because that it protects against that, sure. But I don't trust union leaders just as much. There's tons of corrupt unions
I agree.
that screw over people as well.
As somebody
I
who is
don't
a
like,
part of a union, I will agree to that 100%.
yeah. So you just have to weigh the benefits and the negatives. But so
Do you
your
know how much?
hypothetical
Do you know how much?
situation,
Do you want to know something crazy? Do you know how much they scalp off the top of supply teachers' pay?
probably a fair amount.
So not only do I pay a yearly due of like $200, but out of the $250 daily rate I get for supply teaching, about $30 of that goes to the union.
Huh? Have
Ha
you
is right.
seen any?
Ha is right.
You
I
seen any concrete examples? Like, I know that you can list what the union could do for you, but have you had any actual experience of benefiting from being in the union?
I've had a lot of newsletters spammed to my email address. Other
That's
than
okay. So
that,
that's totally
no, the union exists to protect you and provide you free legal advice in the case in which you
right.
get railroaded into a
That's,
situation. But I would say probably 50% of the times that a teacher gets railroaded into a situation, they probably deserved it. They were probably diddling that kid.
yeah, I mean, fair enough. And even still, that 50% of the time, the union will try to defend you, but they might not be able to, anyways.
Oh, and even beyond that, beyond the union trying to defend you, they don't necessarily always try and defend you. The union still has standards,
Oh,
and if they think you fucked that kid, you fucked the kid,
yeah,
and you're fucked.
yeah, exactly. You're paying, that's my point. Like, you're paying your union dues for them to say, yeah, we'll look at what happens and we'll consider helping you, but we might lose, we might disagree, we might not care. You're still paying the same amount regardless. Okay, so that's actually leads into I can defend your hypothetical situation. If unions won't be necessary potentially in that socialist situation because those uh, factors will be incorporated into the government, but they will be slightly, at best, more inclined, likely, accountable to provide the full extent of what they're saying they will provide. Whereas a union, I know that they probably won't most of the time, but a government run situation would be like barely better, but most unions, it's like lined paper, scribbled notes, whereas a government is printed, typed notes as a analogy. If that, you know what I mean by that? Like,
Yeah, well, I
government's
think
not any more likely.
honestly, though, I think the
What?
government is much more necessarily corrupt than the unions would be. So I think there's less of a chance you get a fair shake out of it becoming amalgamated with the government than if you had a standalone union.
I basically agree. All I'm trying to say is, in any given situation, if it was government orchestrated, they have to at least show their work. Whereas, yeah, if you had to bet on a side, the privately run and built up union is more likely to be on your side, but they don't have to prove anything. They don't have to justify anything. They can, like, for example, what's the guy's name in the States? Um,
Epstein?
like like the from I don't know, not the 80s or not. I don't remember when it was, but the mob influence on American unions is kind of case in point what I'm saying. Like,
I have
the
no
mob
clue
will
what the
do
fuck
good
you're
things
talking
for
about.
you, and you can trust. What?
I have no clue what the fuck you're talking about, so explain as best you
You know the
can
new
to me.
movie? I don't remember his name. Does the word Teamster do anything for you?
Teamster?
Yeah, Teamster.
I recognize the name. It's like a text
Hold
article,
on,
isn't
I
it?
forgot that I'm on the computer and I can just look this up.
Yeah, you literally have a computer, and that's wonderful. All right,
Yeah.
beyond that, like, so the union serves more purposes other than protecting you against diddling children. Um, and
No
so
way.
so so there's collective bargaining in there and whatnot, right? So like there is teachers deserve X number of days off, so there's sick day bargaining, there's total income bargaining, etc. But I think, like, personally, and you're probably gonna disagree with this, and we're gonna have an episode on education. I do not very much support a public education system, and I'm very much more in support of a private education system because I think it provides better outcomes. We won't get into that too much nowadays,
Yeah, I don't
but I just,
comment.
yeah, like there's obviously got to be a public option and like voucher systems and stuff like that. You can't just go completely privatized because otherwise you fuck the low income guys. But beyond that, like, being as somebody who's been in the public education system a lot, I've seen how much it protects, shitty actors. It protects shitty teachers a lot, and people that don't actually care to put a lot of effort into it, and they're making 97 grand a year off the taxpayer. And just
How don't you think that will happen?
because capitalism and private enterprise runs on a meritocratic system. If you got a shitty teacher, you know what you do? You either fire them or you stop sending your kids to that
It
class,
doesn't.
and then they have
Oh,
nobody in their fucking class. Yes, the private institution either doesn't employ that teacher, or the pupils and the students and like the parents, obviously through the pupils, pull their students out of that situation because they're like, why am I paying 10 grand a year for my kid to be taught by some fucking whack job? Regardless, we'll have a whole episode on
because
education because I'm sure we're not gonna get too much into education, even though that's like my fucking wheelhouse, and
yeah,
but I've seen there's a
I
lot
just
of
told
shitty
her
teachers.
it's
There are
not.
just trust me, there are a lot of shitty teachers that are protected by the unions nowadays because once you hit a
I
certain
don't
level
disagree
of,
with that.
yeah, like, well, it's with any union. Once you hit a certain level of seniority, the union protects you, and it's regardless, and you can coast for your last 20 years. And then you end up with a bunch of fucking kids who are so uninspired because their teacher fucking gave them a handout every single day and just gave them a handout and gave them a handout and fill out the handout. And here's a fucking page out of the textbook to read, and here's your handout to do off of it. And like, it's such fucking garbage. And being somebody, like, and this isn't to disparage all teachers because there's a lot. Like, I would say probably 70+% of the teachers really give a fuck about their students. But the unions don't exist to protect the teachers that are good at their jobs. The unions exist to protect the teachers that are fucking shit. Simply put, the unions exist to protect people that are not good at their job for the most part, in my general opinion. Now, maybe you disagree with that, but that is my general opinion is unions usually exist to protect the worst of the workers.
I don't think that's why they exist, but they may do that
That is the
occasionally. Yes,
okay.
I don't
That
just.
is why they exist. That is they function, they perform. Fucking at me, bro.
Hello?
I said fucking at
You
me,
cut out.
bro.
I didn't hear most of that.
I said, okay, maybe it's not why they exist, but is they function, they perform. Fucking at me, bro.
Okay. But yes, they might perform that function, but I don't think they're intentionally trying to.
Yes,
And
100% they are, because it's somebody who pays their dues on time. They don't give a fuck the quality of the teacher. They care about the guy who pays their dues on time. They don't care.
Yeah, but just by chance, the people that pay their dues on time and are more concerned with keeping the union together are the shittier teachers. Sure, but yes, they may know that, and so they're not stopping that being a factor. But okay, yes, the overall outcome, I don't think you're wrong. But regardless, if it was switched to privatized education, the same things would still happen. Like, it's not, on paper, it could be about merit. It's really about who personally wants who to be where and who's putting money into what.
I disagree 100%, but we're not going to get into it too much. If you want episode 2 to be about education, I will throat fuck your fucking skull, bud.
Episode 2, bud. I think we just decided.
It can be whatever, but if you want it to be about education, I will literally shove my cock 10 inches down your throat.
Well, let's do that before we do an episode where we're together.
As much fun as trying to keep it YouTube friendly was.
You will love that.
Anywho, yeah, no, I don't know, like being somebody who's in the union, I have a very sour taste about unions in my mouth, because it's like they garnish my wages, they take a yearly subsidy regardless of whether I work, and personally I see a literal zero out of any of that money. So I pay $230 something plus tax for my yearly dues. Then they garnish every day I work, and I don't see anything out of that other than a fucking newsletter once a month in my email box. And it's like, yeah, they might be collectively, they might be collectively bargaining to give me a better wage. But guess what? I believe in my own ability to the extent that if there wasn't a union to set guidelines, like, for example, the LTOs only go to the top 5 most senior people. So on the list of people that apply, you're only allowed to interview the people that are in the top 5 for seniority. So that protects people that are shit, that are just on the seniority list. Right? If that didn't exist, I believe I could already have a full-time job based on my merits.
Okay.
And like, so I honestly believe the union exists to hold me back at this point. I don't believe in it helping me, even though it might give me slightly higher wages per day I supply. I wouldn't be supplying as long if it didn't exist, in my own personal opinion.
Okay, so are most unions set up where, like, if you're in the teaching system, as soon as you become a teacher, you're in the union? Yeah.
You literally can't teach a day without becoming a part of the union. You need to provide your union membership number to the school board for them to allow you to teach.
Right. Okay. So I don't know this for sure, but that's not how it works for most unions.
Yes,
like, you can work at places.
Yes, it is. Trade unions function the exact same way. Trade unions require that a business who employs trade employees who are part of trade unions requires that all employees be a part of the trade union and provide their trade number to that business before they are able to work. Otherwise, you know what they're called? They're called fucking scabs.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know the actual details. You know better than me. The only thing I'm like thinking of when I'm talking about this is like my dad, when he worked at the factory he could be in the union or he could not. And so that concept exists as well. I guess it's more likely to be you have to be in the union in order to have that job, but
Unions
there's
function similarly to socialism, totalitarian ideology, right?
there is similarities there for sure, but regardless, we should move on from the education because we should talk about this in a whole other episode.
Weed. So, well, beyond that, when it comes to regular unions, so I worked for a union place when not union, and I worked through a temp agency. So that was when I did concrete construction after the summer. So I worked for people.
What you just said is what I was getting at.
So yeah, I worked at a shingling place doing roofing for a summer, and partway into that summer did not enjoy it, and I went to a temp agency and they hired me. So the union has a contract with the employer that the employer hires union members at such a rate, and then they hire people at the temp agency for a lesser rate, as well as the temp agency takes a cut off the top. So I was getting $12 an hour to do the same job as somebody who was getting $19 an hour through the union. So the union member gets $19 an hour. The company pays $17 an hour for a non-union person, pays $5 of that to the temp agency, and then I get $12 of that.
Okay, yeah, that's bullshit in the sense that temp agencies shouldn't get that much for getting you a job.
Yeah, so the union has an exclusive contract with the employer that the employer is allowed to hire outside of union people at a rate that is lesser than them. So the unions usually have a contract similar to such, which is that they have an exclusivity contract which requires them to hire based on conditions.
A lot of the situations that I've heard of that are like that, the only way to get a job at that place would be through the temp agencies or through the union. You can't just apply, you're not going to get a job. So you either pay this or you pay that. Like,
all right, do you want to talk about your two small concepts before we get into the weeds of this and talk about unions for fucking 2 hours?
Yeah, because I'm about done too. So let's make my 2 points quickly and then.
Well, no, it's not about done. It's just like we could literally have a whole episode on unionization.
That's what I mean. Go on about anything. So I'd rather get everything I have to say off, and then you can ask me whatever.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so these aren't really questions. I guess the first one is.
It could be a statement with an opinion attached to it.
No, they're more just like bullet points that I can form into a question. But the first one's actually a question. In your opinion, what is the difference between free market, if you think there's a difference, between free market capitalism and just generic capitalism?
Well, I don't necessarily think there's a difference. It's just under which prescription you fall on capitalism. So, like, most people describe generic capitalism as being a free market system in which countries trade with each other and industry goes somewhat regulated. But, like, truly free industry doesn't necessarily exist in modern society. Free industry without caveats was tried in like early 19th century, and we saw detrimental effects to, say, non-compete clauses and environmental conditions and stuff like that. So truly free market, laissez-faire capitalism, anarcho-capitalism has not been a thing since the early 1900s. So like generic capitalism usually describes modern day free market capitalism with all of its general caveats included.
By caveats, would you accept wealthy private individual corruption?
Yeah, there's all sorts of corruption. I mean, hey, guess what? There's not just private individual corruption. There's also public individual corruption. For example, we'll take the
public and private is the same thing. All I meant is non-government.
Well, I'll take a government official is who I was going to take. So You said non-government.
Okay, but I didn't mean private as opposed to public. I just meant when I say private interest, I mean it as opposed to state interest. So it's still public.
Okay, well, yeah. I mean, there's always going to be corruption, and corruption always goes in the individualistic sense. Like, you're not going to be corrupt in the sense that like, oh, I'm going to fuck over all these workers for the betterment of the state. Nobody has that mentality.
That makes absolutely no sense. So yeah.
Yeah. People are always going to go, I'm going to fuck over all these workers for the betterment of myself and my friends.
Yes. Okay. So free market capitalism basically can't exist or is very unlikely. It's an ideal version of capitalism.
Free market capitalism is the current system we have, but it's free market capitalism under restraints. Like, you don't let the rhino run free through the fucking. Yeah, you don't let the rhino run free. You attach a 20-pound weight to this leg and a 30-pound weight to this leg and slow him down a little bit so that he doesn't fucking destroy everything.
Yes. Okay. That's what I mean. Like, as the purest form of free market capitalism, it won't ever really be able to exist because it will be influenced by every person and everything involved in it.
Yeah, and I would say 99% of people don't necessarily advocate for entirely free laissez-faire capitalism because it is not actually a desirable outcome.
Yeah. Yes, okay. I could go further in that, but yeah, fair enough. Okay, so before I get to my second question, I found the person I was talking about. Do you know who Jimmy Hoffa is? You there?
Yes.
Where are you going?
Sorry, I thought Tim would talk for longer.
If you weren't there, how would me talking even be beneficial?
Well, I thought you're more long-winded. I thought you would talk for longer and literally.
I'm not long-winded at all.
My bathroom is the next room over. I thought I didn't have enough time to take a piss while you described your situation. So Jimmy Hoffa, I know the name, but should I Google him or do you want to enlighten me?
It's not. You don't necessarily need to, and I don't really know enough about it to make a huge point. But he was part of the Teamsters. I think he was the president of the Teamsters for a while. But my point was the connection of the mob to unions and.
Oh yeah, the unions were fucking all entangled with especially in the
states,
the Italian, Puerto Rican areas of the states. They were very entangled. Yeah, no, 100%.
I can't fully remember why I was getting to that point, but
Jimmy Hoffa was the guy that what's his name? Fucking the 1-inch guy played.
Joe Pesci?
No, not Joe Pesci. The other guy, fucking
Scarface.
I sacrifice every inch for you.
I can't think of his name now. Yeah. Anyway, there's the Irishman, the new movie.
Scarface.
Pacino.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways,
Al motherfucking Pacino.
You're the one telling me not to swear. My point was.
I have given up on that like an hour and a half, maybe 3 hours ago.
It's been tough.
Been on here?
Fair amount of time, I think. I'm pro mob and I'm pro Teamster more or less, but all I was trying to get at, I think, was that unions can be beneficial and what?
There's a tie between Teamster and mobs?
Teamsters are essentially all mobsters. Teamster is the euphemism for mobsters at that point.
Do you not think mobs and unions are basically analogous? They're collectivization.
They're not analogous, but they're very interconnected.
No, you know what I mean by analogous? They're direct representatives.
The same.
There are semi-direct representations of each other in a similar context, right? So
yes, I don't agree with that fully.
The mob helps the little guy in plenty of senses and does a similar function to what a union does. They're almost directly analogous.
But you could be a union member and You can be involved in the union and not be a mobster, and you can be a mobster and not be involved in the union. They do similar things, but in the sense of Jimmy Hoffa and Teamsters, that's an example of the mob literally being the union.
Yeah, I was listening to, as funny as it is, as much fun as talking seriously, listening to Joey Diaz talk about anything is the greatest thing on the fucking planet. For anybody who hasn't listened to Joey Diaz. So listening to him describe how the mobs worked in New York City to Joe Rogan was great. And yeah, no, the mobs were 100%. They always take their cut. Doesn't matter. The union guys are in on it. The union guys are oftentimes entangled with the mob and mob members at some level. Like, yeah.
You didn't let me get my overall point.
Sorry, they'll give their 5% cut to the fucking mob because they don't care, because they're going to get that kickback at the end of the day when the mob protects them and does something for them.
I wasn't trying to, regardless of, like, I more or less agree with you and I'm on the same page there, but my point of making that connection and talking about Hoffa was the potential for unions to be set up. Like, I am not necessarily opposed to gangsters and mobsters. Whatever. Obviously, there's shitty parts of that, but
why not?
Why am I not opposed to them?
Yeah, they're tyrannical groups in which they oppose their ideology upon others through force.
Imagine if we were living through, I can't remember the word for when alcohol was illegal, prohibition. If that was currently happening, the only people supplying and creating the alcohol trade were the mobsters. Why would I not be on their page?
Yeah, but you're implying that you lived in a different era. Imagine you were living in modern bases. No, imagine you were living in modern
industry does things like that. Obviously, I don't want people to be dying all the time and living in constant fear like that, but
imagine
that happens.
So you work at a restaurant, you're a chef. Imagine in modern day society, a large Italian gentleman and his friend walk in, they got guns in their belts, and they take 10% of your earnings for the total restaurant, including part of your wages, in order to keep the restaurant open. Are you okay?
Well, chances are, first of all, a fair amount of Italians run restaurants, and a fair amount of restaurants and Italians.
Racist, Tim.
It's not racist necessarily.
You're a fucking racist prick, you fuck.
Okay. Restaurants are generally, and more so in the past, but it's not a bad guess to assume mob involvement in restaurant management, and it's not a bad guess to assume Italian involvement in restaurants or mobsters. So, anyways, it wouldn't work that way. But obviously, the mob's not good. I'm not trying to say that. Just neither is the government. Neither is the opposite.
So it's almost as if any large enough organism, any large enough public organism is bad.
Okay, not necessarily.
You're sounding
I'm getting
very
off the
libertarian.
point. You don't need to go for. No, I'm not. If my support for the mob, I suppose, is anti-government, but that doesn't make me libertarian. All I was trying to say, and then we can finish this point. You can go on with your question. Let me finish so we don't go on further. Is unions are open and free to have influences like the mob that can make it, like, the unions are open to any sort of influence, whereas if, to go back to your question before, if unions were absolved into governmental systems, that influence may still be bad, but it's not an open range of possibilities. That's not any better necessarily, but I think that was more or less what I was trying to say with the Hoffa point.
I think you're missing on both of those. There's forced compliance through force.
I'm not saying one is better than the other necessarily.
No, I know, but in both the union case and the case of mobsters, you have compliance through force, where people will literally, say we'll take a scrapyard, for example. Scrapyard shuts down because there's a union strike. Scrapyard hires scabs, people that are non-union, right? Those people come in and start working. You know what the union guys do? They come there after hours and they start doing destruction. They use force in order to destroy means of production, etc. Or they threaten the current workers with violence in order to not show up to work. And the mob works in a very similar fashion, as you know. So both of them have compliance through force, which is also very similar to socialism, as you seem to be so fond of.
I don't disagree, and what I was going to say to that is the influence by force is very demonstrated with the mob and with the union, whereas socialism, capitalism, government influence is force, but more subtle.
I think you got a little bit of blind spot for the force that has been used, and you just think, oh, that's communism. That's very separate from socialism, democratic socialism.
I thought what I just said was more from your side. What am I being blind to?
Well, it's just like you agreed to the point that, like, yeah, both like unions and mobs use force in order for compliance for their ends, right? Which you both agree to.
Yeah.
I think socialist societies do the same thing, whereas they use force in order.
Subtle force.
Subtle force. What is subtle force? Subtle force is, for
Like,
example, famine. For example, taking food out of your family's mouth. Well, if
Yes.
you want. Okay, so you agree that what Russia, China, and Germany, Venezuela, Cuba are all socialist societies that use famine in order to force compliance to a socialist ideology?
I don't see how what I just said leads to that at all.
Like the Holodomor.
First of all, none of those are even socialist societies.
The Holodomor was literally a starvation in order to force compliance. The fucking Cultural Revolution in China was forced starvation in order to force compliance. The Venezuelan fucking oil crisis was 25 pounds a year that the average citizen lost. Are you like you're talking about forced compliance through subtle means, and then I said famine, and you're like, yes, that's subtle, and then it's like, yes, so here's 15 examples of where socialism tried it.
None of
you're like,
those are socialist
that's
economies.
communism, and it's like, well, it's an exact fit to what you just said. Well, how is it different? How explain to me how it is different other than definitionally. No. Wait. Let me say, and then I'll give you like 5 minutes to explain. Like, how is it different? How is it different? You're saying, oh, it's different because, like I said, under these conditions, forced compliance, yada yada yada, and then these people did exactly what I said, but that's not socialism. That's communism, and it's like. The only difference between socialism and communism is the abolition of private property. In my idea, you haven't exactly stated your exact definitional difference. You said this and this, and there's somewhere a definitional difference, but I can't say exactly where it differs. You don't really have and I don't want to say perfect because I'm not going to say mine is a perfect definitional difference, but you don't have a very exact definitional difference. But at the same time,
regardless.
But at the same time, it fulfills what you were just saying, but then you're saying not real socialism, and it's like, how is it not? Definitionally, how is it not real socialism? It is control. It is control of means of production. It is abolition of everything that is not private property. Like in Venezuela, they still have private property. They just devalued the dollar to the point where it wasn't worthwhile to have private property. Okay, like in China, they still had private property. They just took over the agriculture industry. So if you wanted food, you better comply because otherwise you ain't getting fucking fed. Right? In Russia, they did the same thing. They had, oh, you can own your own homestead and blah, blah, blah. But the farmers are owned by the government. So if you want to be fed and not sent to Siberia for being a fucking like what do they call them? What do they call them? The farmers in Russia that actually like were productive, they had a specific name for them and I don't remember what it was. But during the Holodomor, serfs are people that rely on the government. So during the Holodomor they still had like specific names for people they sent to Siberia that were productive farmers. So like during every one of these, they had, it's okay to have private property. As soon as that private property makes in excess of your neighbor, you are now a ill on society and we must like deal with you. So like Where's the difference? That's where I want to know. That's the biggest thing. And we're going back to the first question where we kind of agree to disagree. But, like, I still don't know where the big difference is between socialism and capitalism is for you. For me, it's private property. But all of these, yeah, you know what I mean. Communism and socialism. But for me, all of these societies, in some aspect, allowed private property to still exist as long as it didn't produce anything. So for me, China during the 1950s, 60s, socialist and communist. Basically the same fucking thing. Russia, socialist and communist. Germany, definitely socialist. New Democratic Socialist Party. Fucking
just making a party called socialist.
Socialist. Cuba, socialist.
Okay, the core difference then in the way you're framing it right now is the core value. And none of those examples that have played out historically have a socialist perspective. Just because you name a party socialist, like the Nazis are the National Socialists, like just because
what you're looking for is ethos.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that is the word I'm looking for. If we're gonna go Greek about it, like communism and socialism are extremely similar, but you can have a communist society play out as they have with no socialist undertones, with nothing socialist about it other than you can try to make that comparison when you need to, but there's no concern on a socialist level. It's communist by definition of what you can weigh and measure and statistically look at. But socialism doesn't have that analytical necessity of measurement.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you something. I'm kind of curious because like both socialism and communism are fairly materialistic. Do you think they're both materialistic?
Well, all economic systems are materialistic.
No.
Yes.
No.
Economics is inherently materialistic.
For the most part, yeah, but socialism usually tries to pretend to not be. Do you
political, like, the political perspectives of all these things warp things and warp opinions in order to serve other aspects. That you can't like take that and then weigh it into real considerations of the merit. Like, socialism is looked at in that perspective, but that doesn't mean that has any real import to its conception.
I've got a question for you, and I wonder how interesting you find this, because I find this somewhat interesting, and by somewhat I mean fairly. So I would say
not find it interesting at all.
I would say most and you'll probably agree with about half of it. I would say most capitalists would describe socialism and communism basically the same.
Yeah, for the most part, general public.
I would say most communists and most socialists describe everything exactly the same, as far as the communist perspective.
No.
The communists describe communism and socialism as the same thing.
No, I don't think so. I think most hardcore communists don't like socialism.
I disagree. Okay, I'm gonna read a quote to you because this is part of my thing. So in my document I put together like a bunch of quotes from prominent people. So Karl Marx being the father of socialism, yeah.
Communism.
Both.
No, I don't agree with that. But sure, go on. No.
Where's the one I'm looking for? All right, Karl Marx. Socialism is the first step towards communism.
Okay.
Lenin. The goal of socialism is communism. And you're telling me communists have a negative view of socialism? It is a means to an end.
Well, you got to look at how these words are being used. There's a difference between actual practical use and theoretical conception.
Yes, of course. Yeah, no shit.
So repeat those two quotes again.
So the Karl Marx one is socialism is the first step towards communism.
Okay, pause. So the socialist mindset, theoretical mindset, is the root for practical implication of communism effectively and positively.
And then the quote from Lenin is, "The goal of socialism is communism."
Yes, okay. So mindset towards practical. You don't
No,
have to have a literal socialist society in order to have a communist society. You need
no,
to have
but
a
it's saying that
socialist mindset.
if you have no, but if we go practical to practical, it says the goal, like, we implement a socialist society, that's never going to be enough, and the idea of implementing a socialist society is in order to further push it towards a communist society, to go practical to
No, see, that
practical.
doesn't make sense.
Yes, it
Like,
does. Well, how does it
what they're
not?
saying is you have to have a socialist perspective in order to make communism work. If you don't, then communism will always be authoritarianly run. That's like what they're saying never played out.
Yeah, no shit, it didn't play out because human nature.
No, because there
They
wasn't
live in a world
socialism
of
isn't inherently not human nature. It's just
yes, it
it's
is.
more likely that people will be greedy. But human nature isn't doesn't have to be greedy. Just it's likely that people in power will fall victim to their
Social
power.
socialism is inherently like ideological and based off of non-reality, based off of a
I don't
society.
agree with that at all.
I okay, well, we can discuss that, but I believe socialism is inherently based off of a reality in which humans don't behave the way they do. And I forget what his name is. Cohen. Do you know Cohen? He's a famous socialist liberal theorist. I think it's
I mean, you'd
Andrew.
have to give me a first name. It doesn't ring a
I
bell,
think
but
it's Andrew Cohen. I
either way, tell me the idea anyways.
he's much more towards Gerald Cohen.
Either way.
Yeah, he's much more towards like a liberal socialism where people have free choice and stuff. But at the end of the day, like, it's socialism in the end goal of a totalitarian ideology. Like, at the end of the day,
Well, that's not real
all
socialism, man.
social.
That's not socialism at all.
Dude, you're talking about one of the most prominent 19th 20 or sorry 20th century 21st century like socialist
Yeah,
philosophers.
but what you just said is socialism with the end goal of totalitarianism. That's nonsense. So if that's
Well,
actually what he
well,
says, I
well,
disagree.
it's not necessarily exactly what he says, but it's what is implied. It's he says a bunch of
Well, then
things, but
I
he
don't
doesn't
agree with
actually.
that at all.
Well, there's a lot of socialist philosophers who say a lot of things, but don't understand the implications of what they say.
Yeah, but that statement you just made is to me pure nonsense. So if that is implied or stated by him,
Do you want to go through
yeah,
this?
either
I
way.
feel like this would be fun. I feel like it'd be fun that we go through. I've got a quote section of like famous philosopher quotes and just reactions. We've already gone through a few of them. I feel like it'd be fun to get your reaction to something.
Okay, well let's frame these in terms of 20 minutes, all right?
Yeah, we'll keep them quick. It'd probably be less than 5. I've got about
All
30,
right.
so
And I have to respond to say my thoughts on 30?
no, we've already
How's
gone
that going
through
to be in
2.
5 minutes?
We've already gone through 2, and like 8 of them are from Karl Marx. So retard.
Yeah, but it's two in. All right, go on.
We went through 2 in less than 10 minutes.
Yeah, and you just said 28 more in 5 minutes.
Yeah, 5 minutes per.
That's way more than 20 minutes still.
Yeah, so first one
Whatever, go
is
on.
so the first one is from Socrates. People get the
Who's
government
that?
they
Hold
shut
on,
up.
hold on. I need to know who that is first.
All right, so do you know where Rome is?
Like underneath Barry,
Yeah, it's south of Barry. And you
20
travel
minutes
yeah,
southwest of.
20 minutes south of Barry, 2,000 kilometers east. All right, so negligent of Tim's fuckery. We'll go with some Socrates. So the Socrates quote is, "People get the government they deserve."
Part of me feels like that's not actually what he's ever said, but sure, possible.
Direct quote. I all of these are pulled direct quotes.
From the internet,
Yes,
which
obviously
automatically means it's
from
correct,
the
but that's not the
internet,
point.
from anthropologists who fucking uncovered his fucking 200 and something year old texts.
Yeah, but Socrates literally never wrote anything, so, but that's
Yeah.
not the point.
Well, okay. Well, fuck the
Okay, it doesn't
fact
matter.
that
It doesn't matter.
it's
I'm just giving you
Socrates.
shit.
Then what do you think of the like
I
regardless of the
know.
weight of the
Exactly.
individual? What does the statement mean to
Oh my
you?
God. Okay. So people get the government that they deserve. Is that what
Yeah,
you said?
yeah.
I mean, with no context, maybe. But if you apply almost any context, obviously that's not correct.
Why not?
Like, because government isn't just a non, like, if the government was a factor that just responded relative to what the person gave it, then sure. But that's not how it works. The government is its own entity that will respond as it works best for the government. No matter what the citizen does, the government will consider that, but it's still going to respond in its whatever way works best for the government.
Are you sure it's not working best for the nation? I feel like that should be where it's going.
Yeah, okay, so fine. What the government is supposed to be a
Supposed to be,
extension of.
but they're not.
Yes, but they will still try to present and do more or less, more often than not, the option and the choice that benefits the nation, which benefits the government, which benefits most of the citizens.
You think what
But
bet?
any
Oh,
given citizen, say that citizen doesn't agree with a choice that will benefit most of the citizens, but not that one citizen is not getting the government that that citizen deserves,
Tim,
even if it's more beneficial for the rest of the citizens.
You're sounding
Like,
very nationalistic socialist.
I don't even know what that means. Those are two entirely different things.
No, they're very intertwined. Canada is very
They're
nationalist.
entwined, sure.
No, Canada is very nationalistic socialist.
What do you mean by nationalist? Like,
Well, nationalist is pride in one's nation.
okay,
So
well,
the whole concept of okay, do you want to go through historical or modern day National Socialism?
neither really, because that's going to get way too off topic.
Well, modern day, okay, well, I hate you. Modern day National Socialism falls under the guise of we are proud of our nation because we're better than you, because we're more inclusive than you, we're more diverse than you. Post, whatever, 1980s, etc. The historic context of National Socialism falls under Nazism, whereas we have to be as pure as we can in order to extricate from our nation those who are impure and will make our nation fail.
Okay, like I said before, just because the Nazi Party was called socialist, nothing about it was socialist.
Very
You can
socialist.
put that label on anything.
I know.
But
I would the Nazi Party personally, and I really don't like bringing them up. I more just do it for the shits and gigs, just to fuck with people. The Nazi Party personally was very nationalistic, yes, but beyond
obviously,
that, but beyond nationalistic, they were very race oriented, which obviously, but
again, yeah.
it was beyond a individualistic race into a purity dimension in which most people don't think. So when they're
Other than
talking,
racist.
well, no, I'm just saying in general. Like even
Yes,
within
yes.
races, people you're like other than races and you're talking about like oh what like black people think there's a purity dimension to like being black and it's
No,
like
not races, racists.
yeah I'm talking about races rather than racists.
No, I said other than racists.
Okay,
People
well
don't
we're
think that
talking
way.
about races, not
No, I know, but
racists.
you
So
said people
like
don't think that way, and I said yes, other than racists.
oh sorry, my bad. I
Okay.
misheard. So the Nazi Party within their own dimension was they had a socialistic mindset, but they didn't implement very socialistic measures. It was like, and I'll agree with you 100% on that, even though National Socialist Party, it was, we're going to have a national identity of Germanism. Okay, within Germanism, what is being Germanic? Okay,
The only way
I'm laying out my case. You can fucking
no,
critique it
I
later.
agree with
You can shut the fuck up right now, Tim, and I'll lay
I
out my
just think I
case.
can quicken your point.
I'm waiting.
If you're a white, blue-eyed, blonde-haired German that fits the description they're talking about, you're included into their socialist perspective.
No.
That's it.
Not 100%.
There's no other way that there's socialist.
No. You're not. Okay, you're missing on the ideological point.
Okay, I'm
You're
going
missing
P.
entirely on the ideological point. So it's what does it mean
Oh,
to
this
be
is ideological.
Germanic?
I'm going P. I'm going P.
And then so
I'm going P.
I'm gonna go P too.
Yeah.
You're really pissing me off with these interruptions. Might punch him in the face if we were in person. Beer number 9. Not really doing a great job of keeping track, but where is it where I can see my camera? Tilt it down a little. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. 9 down. And away we go on to number 10. Oh, everything I ever hoped for. I brought a cooler up into, like, I got a home office up here on my second floor of my house. I brought a cooler up here to make sure I never had to go downstairs. I'm really hoping my dog's okay. Been locked in the kitchen the whole time. My girlfriend gets home, like, literally any time. She finished work at 11, so hopefully she takes care of the doggo. That's a hope and a prayer. We're going to try and hook up the second headphone without having any drop and deal with it with Tim. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Seems good. If there is somebody out there watching, say hey. Tim and I are pretty nice guys. To chill. And if you have said hey and we haven't said hey back, I'm sorry. OBS doesn't show any fucking chats. It just shows me saying welcome to be here. Welcome to being a Drinking Beers and Grinding Gears episode 1, where socialism and capitalism is being discussed. It's a fun time. There's a little more agreement than I thought. Tim's like, I don't want to describe positions to him. He seems a lot more free market oriented than I expected. But beyond the free market orientation, like, he definitely, like, yeah, I believe in a lot of social welfare states. Maybe not to the extent that he does, but I am surprised genuinely at his perceptiveness towards receptiveness towards capitalist structures, and I'm generally happy about that, because like I say, like, so Tim's got his BA in philosophy, and then he has his master's in philosophy, and now he's doing his master's in library sciences, and like being in a social science setting for fucking a decade at this point. I was a little more worried about the fact that he would be disconnected from reality, and he seems to be still fairly grounded. It's probably why he's my friend. But yeah, it's a good thing. It's nice that we can come to some common ground on things. I know I probably seem a little hard-headed towards things, but like I genuinely believe in what I'm saying, and that socialism tends to be a fairly evil ideology, and it's an ideology that gets rationalized by people with good intentions to bad outcomes, if it makes sense. So like the ideals of socialism are all good. It would be great if all of the ideals of socialism would come true, but they're based on the fact that we live in a perfect society with people that are moral and just, and would, not fucking take a goat from their neighbor if their neighbor had 6 goats and they had 3. And we live in society where people are people. People murder, people kill, people steal. We live in reality where we have to deal with the flaws of humanity. I feel like capitalism deals with the flaws of humanity a lot better based on its meritocratic system. So meritocratic system meaning that like it's based on merit. You get what you deserve, and you deserve what you have earned. You earn based off of the work that you put into the system. And not only do you benefit from the system, but everybody as an individual benefits from the overall production of the system. So I feel like that is the best economic system moving forward, because everybody benefits off of the production of others. People are incentivized to be productive. People are incentivized to have high levels of merit because they receive massive rewards for them. And based off of the rewards that they receive and the production that they put out, the entire society benefits. And I just feel like that's personally the best. I'm not saying ever, and I will never say, that a capitalist society is a perfect society. There is always room for improvement. But I don't think a social revolution is the improvement that we are talking about. I really don't. I think it's all well and good that you can go advocate for socialism. I think it's dangerous. I genuinely believe advocating for socialism is a dangerous ideology, because it's one that permeates into young folks' brains. Like, there's an old adage, and I don't exactly remember what it is, but it's show me a man who's in his 20s who isn't a liberal, and I'll show you a man without a heart. Show me a man who's in his 30s who isn't a conservative, and I'll show you a man without a brain. And it's like, as you grow up, as you become more family oriented, as you become more individualistic, I don't even know necessarily individualistic. I would leave that one out. I'm liberalism, and that has kind of tainted that term. But as you grow up, as you become more family oriented, as you become more self-dependent, you become more conservative because you want the government less involved in your dealings. And I have no problem paying taxes in any form, but taxes should be reasonable. Taxes should never exceed a third of one's income. If I am paying more than a third of my total income to the government, there is a problem. And a third is the top federal income tax bracket in Canada, and that's over $215,000. And honestly, if you're making if you're making $215,000 and you're paying a third of that to the government, that's what, 70, a little, like about 70,000. So you're still making 130,000 a year. That's not bad. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a very reasonable income. You're making good money. I can understand why people would still be upset with that at the Toronto levels. Don't fucking live in Toronto. The Toronto real estate prices are absurd. You're paying in Toronto. You're paying one, like my house. My house rate. Okay, I'll tell you a little story. So, I live in a smaller town in Ontario. I have a 3,000 square foot house that is 4 bedrooms and 2 full baths that I bought when I was 25. In Toronto, this house would cost north of $2 million. In the place in which I live, this house cost me $290,000. $290,000. I didn't have the biggest amount for down payment, and I pay a good amount, and I've done a lot of work on this house. This house is worth probably over $400,000 now, based on the work I've done, because, handyman and such. I try and put some good amount of effort into my house. But I'm still saying, like, I'm personally, I don't believe in a city structure. Cities tend to breed a lot of negative outcomes. Like, cities breed a lot of positive outcomes and negative outcomes. So, like, I used to live in a city when I was in university. I was at a major university in one of the cities. And the best part about being at a major university in one of the cities is the food. The food is unreal. When you have multiculturalism at that level, where you've got, Indian food and Thai food and Chinese food, and it's all within a fucking 10-minute walk of the university, and you can go wherever you want. You can get all this food, and it's great. Food is one of the best things. It is one of the best cultural things that somebody can share. Is food. And no shits and gigs. Just culturally, one of the best things you can share with others is food, because it is universal. Taste buds are universal. Like, that delicious fucking, like, gyoza, universal. Everybody's gonna love that. So that's one of the major benefits. But when you get to these cities, and like 125,000, okay. 150,000, you're pushing a little bit. Once you push above about 150,000 to about 200,000 plus, which is where one of the cities I lived in was over 200,000, you end up with a lot of problems, social problems. You end up with a lot of low-income areas. You end up with stratification of income, right? You have people who are working at so people work at major industries. At this major industry, there's a bunch of people working for low income levels, and at the same time, there's people working at high income levels to manage the people that are managing the people at the low income levels. So you end up with a massive stratification of income in these cities. This doesn't happen in smaller rural communities. So I feel like it's a problem of the cities that needs to be solved by the cities. And it's just, I've lived in major cities, and I've lived in smaller towns, And living in the smaller communities just feels more desirable. It feels more interconnected. It feels like I have more of a say over the governance of my own town. It feels like when I vote, it means something and not part of the 125,000 or something like that, right? It's just, I don't know. I'm not an advocate for big cities. I feel like they breed a lot of problems that democracy isn't ready to deal with, let alone capitalism isn't ready to deal with. But democracy is not ready to deal with the problem of shitty education, overcrowding, job loss, high murder rates, high crime rates, high population density that leads to high levels of fucking teen pregnancy. Democracy isn't ready to deal with these things, and yet it's forced to do so. Democracy works best in rural populations. And we have increasing concentrations of populations which lead to major issues. I don't know. It's just my part on where I think it goes. I'm not gonna condemn you for living in a big city. It is your own personal choice, but like, think about it at least. Beyond that, I don't even know. I don't know whether Tim's coming back. He might be dying in the toilet. Said he only had 6 beers tonight to drink, 6 tall boys. A boosh. Exciting things. I'm hoping at some point during our sessions, because we're gonna do a few of these just for the shits and gigs, just for fun. I'm hoping at some point that we'll have some guest speakers in and just talk about whatever. My brother's interested in coming on here. I know our one buddy our one buddy Isaac's probably interested in coming on here. Just discuss the ideas. Tim's calling. Give it a sec.